How's it Thursday already? A good Thursday morning to you, Real Talkers. It is April 15th, and this is episode, what would this be? We don't really talk about the show this way, but this is like 93. 93, the Nuge. I love it. Little reference for our Edmonton listeners and hockey fans from coast to coast that tune into the show. Hello, hockey fans. That's as close as I can get to old school excellence. Samuel G. Brooks alongside me this morning, the show's technical producer.
Friends.
We've realized for the first time today, as we take the Uncle Sam cam, that you and I actually own. This is the first time I think that the paths have crossed. We're not wearing them together today, though I think that may have been cute. We've just realized we own the same shirt. You walked in and I went, hey, good looking.
I like this shirt. It's like it's kind of abstract. Kind of looks like it's either like I see it. It kind of looks like slices of blood orange or maybe blood cells. You know what I mean? It's just
blood cells.
kinda
I
looks like
like
blood
that.
cells,
I was
you know what I
thinking
mean?
it
It's a
looks
cool
like
pattern,
in the winter as a slow, sleepy, deep river. Crawls through. You can typically see, and there's a name for them. You probably know what it is.
the ice floats on it.
They're like the really neat formations.
Yeah, they're called. We brought this up on the show before. They're called frazzle pans because
pans, right.
it is frazzle ice, and that's what my friend Vince studies.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
We did have this conversation. Boy, so now we know the answer. When does a show start getting redundant and boring and start to repeat itself? It's episode 93. So there you have it. It also would remind me, although not quite exact in shape, I hesitate to say it because I know that we have woke audience members, so to speak, but I just want to say the word because I haven't said it for years. It might sort of resemble a paramecium. Such a great word to say. I think I started to feel smart and accomplished right around the grade where we started learning about amoeba and paramecium. And then you sort of started thinking, I sound like a doctor. Maybe I should go on the internet and share my hot takes. I sound like a doctor. Good morning, everybody. In about 13 minutes, we're going to be checking in with the co-chairs of the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce. As with any strong political lobby, the acronym is powerful. WEST. And that's the message of the Western Economic Solutions Task Force. And Randy Goulden and Charlie Clark and Paul McLaughlin will join us. Randy, she's a councillor in the city of Yorkton, and she's the co-author of a piece alongside Mayor Clark out of Saskatoon, and Paul McLaughlin, who's the president of the Rural Municipalities Association here in Alberta. So the three of them put this editorial together, and we thought it was a pretty good focus leading up to the federal budget. It's the first federal budget we're going to see from this government in about 2 years. That's coming up on Monday, and obviously we'll be talking about it. So we're going to get a sense of how the West wants in to this budget. That's coming up in about, now 12 minutes or so. And in about 75 minutes from now, I'm very excited for this conversation. A filmmaker, the guy behind, have you seen Farm Crime? Has anybody seen what Geoff Morrison's been doing? It's streaming now on CBC Gem, season 2 of Farm Crime. You can check out bigcedarfilms.com, or you can check out the CBC Gem streaming service, the app, whatever. That's very generous of us, isn't it? Like that was just providing all of the avenues to their content. But we're here because Geoff's a great storyteller. The focus he takes, you're thinking farm crime, you're going to think everybody's trying to steal everybody's quads and cattle rustling, and there's a little bit of that. But there's also like murder hornets and baby eels and like really strange stories out of Canada's agricultural producers, their world. And I'm looking forward to that conversation with Geoff. Plus your emails. We're going to touch on stories of the day, including, what do you even call it? A politician in front of a live camera in his office in Ottawa that caused quite a stir. And Will Amos, had a bit of egg on his face. Don't show the photo yet, Sam. He said obviously this was a huge mistake. And part of me, I'm gonna approach this like a bit of a teenage boy for a second. Although that's a weird context, but you know what I'm coming at this in slightly immature fashion, because I've seen some people talk about things like consent and sharing nudes and all this, and I think there's a difference here. Although I'm not Will Amos, so ultimately the message needs to be that however he would feel about this might be most important. I think it's different than sharing nudes. It's not like he sent these to his girlfriend and then they broke up and now his girlfriend's putting them up on the internet. But at the same time, so. We have a hot take on that. I think it might not be the worst thing to ever happen to Will Amos, to be honest, but Real Talkers can let me know what you think. The hashtag RealTalkRJ, and of course our live chat going, and we'll keep an eye on our inbox, talk@ryanjesperson.com. This show is presented by our title sponsor. Each and every weekday morning, it's Bitcoin Well. And if you missed founder and CEO Adam O'Brien on the show, I guess a few days ago now, you can find it, anywhere you get your podcasts. Just look for Real Talk Ryan Jesperson, or of course on our YouTube channel. Bitcoin Well is all about financial sovereignty. And you heard Adam on the show. He said this isn't like sell your house and cash in all your assets and invest it all into crypto. He talks about the 1% idea. And if you want to learn more about that, you can find the team at Bitcoin Well under the sponsors tab on our website, ryanjesperson.com.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Woke up beside our voiceover girl again this morning. What a way to start the day, let me tell you. Of course, that's my lovely wife, Carrie. Always appreciate her voice work. You can check out what she does at carrieskelton.com. We're just sharing the love today on content. We have a huge respect for content creators here on Real Talk. If you want to see what Carrie does, check out carrieskelton.com. So here's the story. Will Amos is a Liberal MP. All right, and yesterday, House of Commons, he appears during question period on camera, and, here's what it looked like. If you're watching us live on YouTube right now or watching this later on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. If you're listening to the podcast, just, Google Will Amos or look on Twitter and you'll find it. Sam, here's what happened. It's a Zoom call, and as you can see, the MP out of Quebec was caught in the buff. Now, what appears to be his cell phone was actually quite tastefully and luckily placed to cover his sensitive nether regions, if you will. And, of course, it caused quite a stir. Bloc Québécois whip Claude de Béfoué laid, pardon my French, in seriousness, by the way. Actually, please do pardon my French. Not an offensive phrase, a throwaway. Please do pardon my French. Interrupted, the BQ whip interrupted the House of Commons proceedings, asking the Speaker of the House, Anthony Rota, to intervene. And here's how it went, Sam. This is in QP. This is not like some community hall meeting in northern Manitoba. This is a federal government MP out of Quebec, naked on camera during QP in the House of Commons. The Bloc Québécois whip to the Speaker, quote, "Since the beginning of the pandemic, you have repeated many times, Mr. Speaker, the importance of respecting decorum and dress code. And I think we have broken a record today because we saw an MP during question period in the simplest of attires. In other words, naked. So if you could remind our colleagues, particularly the men, that a tie and jacket are obligatory, but also a shirt, underwear, and pants. We were able to see that the MP was in great physical form, but I think it's important to remind him to control his camera." So what's most important in this is how does Will Amos respond? And so he tweeted this out shortly after, Sam. Let's take a look at his tweet. This from the MP out of Quebec, who said, "I made a really unfortunate mistake today, and obviously I'm embarrassed by it. My camera was accidentally left on as I changed into work clothes after going for a jog. I sincerely apologize to all my colleagues in the House. It was an honest mistake, and it won't happen again." Well, yeah. This is the guy. We all know one person or one friend that has electrical tape or hockey tape over their webcam. And sometimes there's a story there. Sometimes there's a reason because they've been burned. And I think it's fair to say that Will Amos has been burned by this. However, and again, I want to qualify this by saying this is an admittedly immature take by a talk host who's just having fun with the story. Because I do know that there are probably serious angles to be had, and many of you, or at least some of you, would probably want to have a more serious conversation about things like consent and sharing images and captured nudes. And I mean, we could have a really high-level conversation about that. And conversations about consent are very important. But just as a throwaway comment, it's not the worst thing in the world to be a politician where image is very important and being caught on camera in a highly forgivable situation, a somewhat believable situation, changing into work clothes after going for a jog. I mean, I mean, okay. I mean, I can think of other things that may have been going on, and you know, heaven forbid, and I'm not implying that they were, but there are several reasons why one could be caught naked in their member of parliament office on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. I mean, where you feel the power. There could be several reasons why one may be naked, and it's not up to me to speculate, and really it doesn't matter. But it's maybe not the worst thing in the world when you are lean and jacked and young and handsome and tall and cut to be accidentally and forgivably caught on camera. Now, Canadians were and remain very interested with this story. As you can see by this great tweet, you can see what happened. Somebody mapped out what Google searches looked like on Will Amos as the story unfolded. And as you can see, if you're watching us on YouTube, and if you're on the podcast, just take my word for it, you would describe this as an exponential rise. If Dr. Michael E. Mann out of Pennsylvania was still on the show talking about climate, he would describe this as the hockey stick graph. And I'm going to leave the metaphors there on what the Google search looks like, the history of Google searches from Canadians looking to learn more about Will Amos. I thought this was pretty funny. A great Twitter account that you should follow out of Calgary, Alberta, Giant Blue Ring. If you know Calgary, you know obviously it's a reference to a pretty prominent piece of public art viewable from the Deerfoot. But I love this from Giant Blue Ring, who posts a fabulous photo of, in my mind, you know, one of the great actors of our time, Bradley Pitt. Giant Blue Ring claims my video was accidentally turned on as I was changing into my work clothes, drying my hair, and putting baby oil on after going for a jog. I sincerely apologize to my colleagues on Twitter for this unintentional distraction. It was an honest mistake, and it won't happen again. Good thing for Giant Blue Ring, they resemble one of Hollywood's, I mean, what a multiple, if I remember correctly, one of People Magazine's multiple winners of the world's sexiest man. So, I mean, yeah, Academy Awards, sure, fine. Golden Globes, you know, SAG Awards, okay. World's sexiest man, cover of People Magazine, Brad Pitt, Giant Blue Ring, pardon me. Imagine how mortified you might be to be caught on camera after baby oiling your 8-pack and unintentionally exposing yourself to all those that follow you and would qualify as fans. Samuel G. Brooks, as I've been exploring this idea here live on Real Talk, I've looked over and you've been tying a bow tie the entire time. Well, I shouldn't say the entire time. You actually tied it in quite efficient fashion. I'm trying to figure out, and I don't think you were doing it for attention, but I'm trying to figure out why you have added a bow tie here and sort of classed it up a little bit.
It's not. It was always my intent to wear one today. I got dressed this morning. It's like it felt like a good bow tie day, and I was just, getting over here and not quite ready for the show when we launched. I was working out some video in the background, so I just finally pulled it out of my bag and put it on. Okay, it was always my intent to wear one.
It sort of felt to me like you were editorializing. You know, we were talking about showing up to work in various states of undress, and I wondered if you had your collar was open when you came in, the button was popped. And I wondered if you were starting to feel underdressed. I wondered because you started dressing it up as I was talking about a guy in the buff in National View. I was reading too deeply into it, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I coincidence maybe, or maybe just sort of a subconscious thing that washed over me, being like, oh yeah, that's I'm gonna go in the other direction of this. I like to look the professional at work. I also don't look that good under this, so we'll just we'll leave that on the table there.
Yeah, so. I mean, let's be quite clear. While our guests are joining us over Zoom, you and I are not joining one another over Zoom. So
yes.
If you were to appear in front of your camera completely naked after going for a jog, it may prompt some valid questions about your approach to decor in the workplace.
I think our HR department might get involved with that.
Yeah, our robust HR department. Some random guy with a fair question. Of course, real talkers, because you have depth and you're serious, are asking questions like, okay, some random guy. I'd love to know some random guy's real name sometime. Or maybe don't share it.
That's the point, though.
Yeah, he and who knows if it's even a guy. But some random guy kind of shares the perspective of the everyman, if you will. As a matter of fact, I take that back. Don't ever tell us your name. I love it. You're kind of like Wilson, behind the fence. It was Wilson, right? Yep. Tim Taylor's neighbor in Home Improvement. You never really saw the face. You kind of see the face, but never really see it. Some random guy says, if we want to play double standards, what if this was a woman who had this photo circulating? Hey, let's be honest. there's no way. If it was a woman whose nudity was, whose privates were exposed, privates. What am I, like 90? Well, if I said genitalia, it would be or 9. There's like a mix. We're having that conversation with our 5-year-old right now. Like, what are the appropriate things to call body parts? Because he's learning all the funny ones. But there's also, again, if we're gonna, what I feel like? I feel like I'm standing over the line. I have to go either fully immature for this one, or I have to go fully serious for this one. Because actually, you would get counselors and therapists and psychologists and teachers and educators and experienced parents that would say you should teach your kids to call their body parts what their body parts are called, and we would have a serious conversation about that. The point being, let's get back to some random guy's point. If this was a woman and that was happening on Zoom, honestly, we wouldn't share the photo. I wouldn't share the photo. I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it. Is that a double standard? I don't know. I mean, if it was a woman who had her, her computer monitor was covering her, her chest, and she had her phone in front of her, as I said earlier, her nether regions, would we then share the photo? I don't know. I guess we would make that judgment call in the time. Yeah, maybe it's a double standard. Maybe it's different that it's a guy. Maybe it's different that I'm a guy. Now someone's going to say, well, Ryan, you being a guy has nothing to do with, oh my, we're in a mind bender right now, aren't we? Anyway, Judy says, yeah, like any woman would undress in a business meeting. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's
the other thing too. You need a certain level of male confidence to even do that.
Do you though? I mean, if you think you're in a private area, like how mortified would you be if you think you're in a private area, which is he's probably got his blinds down, his door's closed, maybe even locked, but he doesn't realize his camera's live. Or maybe he was signed in and then thought his camera was off or something, or maybe it's not an accident. Who knows? Corrine says, like, really? Like, who changes in front of a desk and an open window? Okay. Crazy James says he's a Liberal MP for now. No. And Eric says, I'm pathetic. He's done with this bro podcast. All right, bro. Peace out, Eric. That's all right. People act like we've never had people stop listening or watching before. Been in the game 15 years, baby. We understand how it goes. It ebbs and it flows. You're not going to love everything. With regards to Crazy James saying, well, he's a Liberal MP for now, there's no way he loses his job over this. There's no way you lose an election over this. I guess that's kind of in a roundabout way the point that I'm making while not really making any point at all, which is that you don't lose your job over something like that. You lose your job if you're Anthony Weiner and you're sharing nudes in unsolicited fashion and it's sexual harassment and that type of a thing, for sure. Probably Governor Cuomo in New York. That story is an absolute disaster. Remember when everybody was talking about what a shame it was that guy wasn't seeking the Democratic nomination? Can you imagine? Can you imagine if that story broke right before the election and he was the Democratic nominee and they lost and it meant that Trump got a second term? Oh, wow. Are our rock stars ready to roll in our round table
just trying to get their audio checked out right
stuff.
Now to make sure that we're good to go.
We're going to be talking about how the West wants in. We're going to be talking about the federal budget that's coming out on Monday. And there's a group of elected officials and folks that have been, it's their job to pay pretty keen attention to where the economy's going, where it's lagging behind, and then to figure out by talking to constituents, people like you, people that are watching and listening to this show, what it is that, the West, and in particular this region, we'll ask them how they characterize it, but for the most part, the prairies would characterize meaningful investment in the economic future or the post-pandemic economic recovery of these provinces. We're going to get into this in just a second. A Real Talk Roundtable coming to you on this Thursday morning. Plus, we're going to get to your emails on interviews we did yesterday about tuition increases at the U of A's Faculty of Law. We've got a great email here from a viewer by the name of Mike who wants to talk about, anti-vaxxers based on some pretty high-profile conversations that have been going on over the last few days. And I know a bunch of you are going to say that video is not about anti-vax. Not the point. Mike's email is. We're going to read a great email about vaccines from Chelsea, who's concerned about firefighters that she knows. And I'm going to tell you a story of a serendipitous and wonderful chance meeting that I had on a sidewalk yesterday that relates to yesterday's show. And it might send chills up your spine in a good way. Wanted to remind you that we're so proud to be partnering with the team at Eden Landscaping. This is the time of year where the team at Eden is blowing the dust off their shovels. I'm just kidding. They never stop working. But they're ready to go on turning dreams into reality. That's one of the biggest reasons why I think so many people have been trusting Eden Landscaping over the last 20 years. It's because they're with you from the first consultation to the design to the build to the implementation of the plan. You're not hiring a landscape architect, paying them, finding a general contractor, paying them, and then, of course, dealing with the inevitable headaches that'll come with everybody dealing with one another. At Eden Landscaping, they've got you covered, and no project is too ambitious. They love a challenge. You want proof? Check out landscapeedmonton.ca. That's where you can see their work. Also, a big shout out to the team at Colby Energy. By now, you know they're Tesla-certified solar installers. By now, you know that they've got certified electricians and electrical apprentices doing the installs. And you probably remember that they do all the paperwork for you, too, which is a big draw to people that don't want to have to do all the research on the reimbursements and the incentives and everything that's there to maybe bring down the cost of you going more green. Check out kubyenergy.ca today, and don't forget Positive Reflections presented by Kubi every Monday. Send us your feel-good stories to talk at ryanjesperson.com. So in the Post Media Papers, just a couple of days ago, an op-ed runs. It's penned by the chairs of the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce. That's put together by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Randy Goulden, Charlie Clark, and Paul McLaughlin came together on an opinion piece. Investment in Western communities needs to be key to the federal budget. And I'm grateful that those three have joined us this morning. Of course, you probably also know that Randy Goulden is a councillor in the city of Yorkton. His worship, Charlie Clark, the mayor of Saskatoon, and Paul McLaughlin, the president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. A good morning to the three of you, and thanks for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Happy to be part of this.
And I appreciate, let me point out the obvious, I appreciate that the three of you have agreed to join us no matter what. And it looks to me like, Mayor, we've caught you in transit, which is fantastic. So I'll respect your hard out time. I know that you're a man on the move. Where are you off to today?
I just had to do a media hit for our upcoming marathon right on the riverbank here. And it only gave me a couple minutes to get onto this show. So I just decided to do it from my vehicle. Hope it works out in terms of the video, but it's the nature of our lives these days with everything virtual. So
I'll tell you, you're coming through loud and clear, and actually the lighting's pretty good too. So you've got nothing to worry about. Randy, this is significant, this conversation, and I know I would say you're wanting to kickstart it. Let's say you have kickstarted it. This is kind of another interpretation of the West wants in, isn't it?
Well, thank you very much for having us this morning, Ryan, and great transition from your first conversations that I was overhearing. I was concerned about if we might get drawn into that conversation.
Yeah, no, I'll leave that alone. Yeah.
The conversations on the Western provinces started in November 2019. We've been working on this for a bit of time, and it's really culminated in some great responses for our municipalities. We brought together Western leaders from the 4 provinces, mayors and of cities, and also the presidents of our provincial municipal associations. So some great leaders with great expertise and experience. And we really have focused in on 4 priorities, Ryan, that we have been working on. And that is, number 1, getting our resources and products to market. Number 2 has been energy development, climate policy, and regulations. The third one is supporting communities to diversify economies. And the 4th is municipal infrastructure and fiscal sustainability. That's what we've been hearing from the people that live, work, and do business here in the Western provinces.
Paul, when we're talking about the West, we talking about, let's clarify here, are we talking BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba? Because if so, obviously we're talking about a ton of different industries, and we can't talk about what's a good fit in Yorkton and what's a good fit in Prince George and what's a good fit in Estevan and then in Churchill, right? I mean, there's got to be some regional sensitivities to where this investment comes.
That is very correct. But as I said in those 4 priorities, it really covers how we can recover and bring prosperity back to our communities. We heard loud and clear that our communities have had challenges even before the pandemic came upon us, whether it was the low commodity prices, or the challenges in the energy sector. It affected all our municipalities. And we've worked very hard to bring the communities together. And you've identified some of the challenges that might have been. But I have to say, chairing this group of very, very experienced leaders, we are all working together to make the West the best it can be. And I know that when we sit down and have these conversations, sometimes they're difficult conversations, but we have come out, in favor of those 4 priorities. And that's what we've been working on these past year and a half.
Paul, you're obviously president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. When we talk about this, I mean, I think you talk to most people in Western Canada, they would acknowledge that there are feelings of alienation, and there's a sliding scale of how strongly people feel about that or how they might define it. But why is it necessary to have a Western presentation like this, or a Western lobby, so to speak?
Well, yeah, thanks, Ryan. Really, when you think about it, you've heard it. There's angst. There's people that are upset. Feel like they're not being heard. There's people that are worried about their livelihoods. And you got to imagine, Alberta and Western Canada is the economic engine of Canada. It's amazing. We punch way above our weight, and we want to be heard. We want that to resonate. And definitely, I'm hearing that. The people that I represent, there's angst. They don't feel like they're being heard by Ottawa. And this has been a fantastic gesture to get these folks together. And as Chair Goulden had said, this is diverse, and you've even acknowledged that. But at the same time, whether it's fiber or oil and gas, we need to do nation building. We need to actually have this government recognize and start to push us forward. We need to actually, post-pandemic, we need to get this economy moving forward. Whether it's fiber, lentils, or oil and gas, we need to get those corridors going and move product from A to B across Canada, as well as exporting.
Mayor, you obviously, I would imagine you could probably right now whip up a list of 5 things that you think would kickstart the economy in Saskatoon and probably in that beautiful region of Saskatchewan. When we talk about things like, expanding energy corridors or rail safety improvement programs, which I think is relevant to people in rural and urban areas. I mean, I think of Lac-Mégantic, the obvious example, but there are other examples too. Wabamun, just 40 minutes from our studio. Ask them about rail safety and the impact of oil spills. What are a couple of things that you think? I mean, what's Saskatoon now? 400, 500,000 people, something like about 500,000 people. What would you like to see that would really help the cities here?
So one of the things that we're looking at, and that the anxiety that Paul's talking about is something that we know is being faced from communities right across the West, because the resource industries are changing, technology is changing, jobs are being lost to automation, and the future is now moving into technological-based employment. And in regions like ours that have been based on resources, we know we need to be part of those solutions, as well as the transition around renewables and clean energy. So in our city in Saskatoon, we've been a hub for food production and agricultural innovation for a long time. And we think and believe, that we've got a strong future as a global epicenter for food production, but we need to make a shift towards instead of just shipping all the lentils and chickpeas and wheat off raw and buying it back, for buying the bread back for where all the value added opportunities are created. We want to be doing that and creating the opportunity, those value added jobs. Now there's a whole new world of plant-based proteins and ingredients processing and all of these things. And we're looking to create hubs for that value-added processing that creates more opportunities here. We need the support of the federal government. So one of the examples of what they're proposing is around the future of Western economic diversification and expanding that regional development authority. And they have a very strategic role to play. And so we've been working with Minister Joly as well as our provincial governments. And this is one example of what comes to the table at the West Taskforce. And so if we come together, urban and rural, with a joint message that we need to be and can be part of the economic drivers of the future and the jobs of the future, but we need to work together and be strategic, urban and rural and all levels of government together. And that's been the focus of our work and some of our advocacy.
Mayor, I think I just Googled Saskatoon metropolitan area, and I think I gave you credit for about 100,000 more citizens than you currently have. But maybe I'm just optimistic. You know, I've driven through Saskatoon, beautiful city. I think there's room for growth there. You'd probably agree.
We've had 70,000 people move here in the last 10 years, and we believe we're on a real trajectory to continue to grow because we have incredible quality of life. We also need to make sure we're being really adaptive and creating opportunity, as the economy changes. So, one of the things I just want to highlight that's been really great about the Western Economic Solutions Task Force is often people focus on an urban-rural divide, especially right across North America, but it's often something that comes up here in the West as well. And it's been just amazing to sit down the mayors of the biggest cities across the region, as well as rural leaders, and find out just how much common ground we have and how much we know that it's the local expertise and the local knowledge that needs to be a fundamental part of building those solutions, building those opportunities, driving the investment and the entrepreneurialism towards a new economy. And so I did want to make sure we highlight that, because I've learned things, and through some of those difficult conversations, we've found that there's actually really a way forward that includes both rural and urban together, building that future.
Councillor Goulden, I note that there's a plea or a call or a demand, however you want to phrase it, a suggestion that the federal government specifically assist farmers with some of the added costs related to carbon pricing. And I would say, I come from, not me, there's not a lot of calluses on my hands, but I come from a farming family. And my cousins have shown me natural gas bills, and I've seen dramatic rises. And I've also had a lot of conversations with reasonable people that support action on climate, that support some form of carbon pricing, that recognize that we need to do something, but that really have a problem with how they feel that agricultural producers are being unfairly treated here. And I think if you had people like me that live in urban areas show the cost increases that we've seen with regards to the carbon tax, and then a farmer were to show their cost increases, it would undeniably be disproportionate. So what specifically, Randy, would you like to see from the federal government here?
Well, and we have recognized that, and those are the discussions we've had around our table. And as Mayor Clark said, we recognize how important that is to our cities and to our larger communities, just as important as it is to our rural areas. So we have been asking for compensation to our ag industry, to our farmers, for the cost of federal carbon pricing on the grain drying specifically, and on heating the barns. We know that there is a private members bill that is also asking for this, and we're supporting that. And we've also been talking with the leaders, both on in government and the opposition parties, and we've had support for that. So we're very pleased about that, and we can actually show the impact that it's having on our farming communities and what that means to them and how that impacts our communities. My community of 20,000 people is the largest community in the east central area of Saskatchewan. And we have 2 canola crushing plants. We have a oak producing plant here in Yorkton also. And let me tell you, that really drives our community. We've got value-based agriculture, as Mayor Clark has said, and that's a real driver in our community, whether it's employees or providing into our property taxes. We need this, and we see the importance of it, and we're going to be working with our rural partners on this.
Paul, I'm going to throw a couple hot potatoes at you because I know you won't mind. We've got our live chat here. We've got some great points on it. Kaylin, who now watches from Vancouver, used to live in Edmonton. She says, as somebody who used to live in the only orange riding in Alberta, I felt more alienated from the province than I did from Ottawa. The idea of alienation is just perpetuating political divides. I've got another viewer right now that says, I'd be curious to know, where did the comment go? I'll paraphrase. Says, I'd be curious to know how these three would suggest that, essentially the comment is, does it make your job more difficult with Alberta's premier constantly picking fights with the prime minister, constantly picking fights with the federal government? Does this idea of alienation or the manifestation of it make the lobby or efforts to cooperate more difficult?
And it's
go ahead,
great,
Paul.
Oh, sure. And it's a great, I have this conversation on a regular basis, and the rest of the crew knows this. So we get polarization, and I think polarization is this wedge. And when you get down and you tell our story, you tell the story as Western Canadians, and exactly what said, we're entrepreneurial. We're ready to rock and roll. We see the future. We're going to move into the future. We're all people at the end of the day. COVID has not picked parts of the country. We've all been affected negatively. And I think that we got to quit using polarization in our politics. We're municipal leaders. FCM is nonpartisan. I represent a nonpartisan organization. I don't care what you voted in federal, provincial election. Let's solve problems on behalf of Canadians. Let's solve problems on behalf of Western Canadians. Let's solve problems on the people we represent too as well. It's tough. My kids are talking about polarization. They see it in the media. I say, you know what? Let's just learn. Let's learn from each other. Let's have a talk, a rational talk. Let's solve problems. And the fact is, I'm a horse guy. And you know what? As an Albertan, we kind of fell off our horse. But you know what? Albertans we get back on that horse. And that's who we are. That's who we are as Canadians. That's who we are as Albertans. That's who we are from Saskatoon. So give us the ability to get back on our horse, and we'll get back on our horse, and we'll get this thing done.
Mayor, let me ask you about, we talked a little bit about rail yesterday in a completely unrelated context. I was talking to an expert about where Canada's airline industry is right now. And a professor out of McGill, former Air Canada executive, says to me, if we lose air travel in Canada, he goes, essentially, like, we're left with rail. And what was really interesting is, number one, you go, okay, yeah, that's maybe not totally realistic to ride trains across the country. But then a whole bunch of people, like a noticeable number of people, started commenting to me saying, look what's going on in France. And look what France is doing with high-speed rail. And look what Japan has done with high-speed rail. And what about high-speed rail corridors? And there's always that one, people talk about Calgary to Edmonton, but I bet you and I could talk about, Edmonton or Calgary to Saskatoon or whatever, across Canada network. Obviously, rail's been a bigger deal. With some of the disappointing news for pipeline advocates and some of the cancellations or court battles around pipelines, and rail has seen heavier pressure. All you need to do is talk to farmers to ask them what that's done to rail car capacity. I mean, we can hit this from 15 different angles. But as the mayor of the city of Saskatoon, why would an investment in the rail safety improvement program, maybe aside from the obvious, the safety, what would that potentially do to your city, to your province, do you think, to the country?
I mean, we've had a number of different derailments of train cars very close to our city and in our region just in the last couple of years. And every time one of those happens, people, panic a little bit and think, what would happen if we had a lac Mégantic in the middle of Saskatoon? And because we see these derailments happening, including oil car derailments in Saskatchewan, it is a big concern. I mean, you just wait and wonder if one of those is going to hit. So any of those investments in rail safety, we know that rail is moving more and more goods, more and more oil, and more hazardous goods. We have yellowcake moving through our province as well, and so it's a huge. We know it's going to be and will continue to be a fundamental part of our trade network. We know it's a very, very important part of how we get our products to market. And we just also want to know it's going to be as safe as possible. And one of the other innovative projects that the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce has been talking about is also an infrastructure corridor, a national utility corridor, where we proactively start to get identified a utility corridor that could be the place that future pipelines go, that gets and figures out the right approval processes, working with Indigenous communities, municipalities, provincial governments, stakeholders, and to proactively get those corridors in place that would also help to deal with some of those concerns about getting products to market, dealing with the uncertainties of the approval processes and environmental assessments, and so this is one of the key focuses. We know that we will still be trade dependent. We need to make sure goods are moving safely, and that we have the capacity to make those utility corridors and interconnect our province our country, between east and west better, so that we can be more energy independent as well. And so this is one of the areas of innovation that we want to really promote and drive as part of, and it's come up through our conversations and hearing between our urban and rural leaders, as I mentioned, that we see this opportunity. And I think just adding the importance of getting Indigenous partnerships in place. We saw with the Wet'suwet'en, blockades, the anxiety that comes up when we're reactively trying to address issues around Indigenous involvement in these projects. And so by everybody coming together and identifying proactively where and how to move these goods across, we think we can make some real progress in nation building as well.
I know that the three of you all have commitments that start at 9:15. For people watching and listening live, that means that we've got about 5 minutes left here in the conversation. And I want to make sure that we end up with our audience members focusing in the right direction, keen to see or keen to understand what maybe they'll be looking for on Monday out of this budget when it drops. I'm intrigued by this proposal from your group, from the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce, from West, that proposes an energy transition community infrastructure fund. And you talk a lot about energy transition, and I've seen some people whose eyes just light up at the potential that they see here. And I also sense a heavy cynicism from some people that think it's absolutely idiotic that we're looking to move off oil and gas, and they have great cynicism around wind and energy and solar rather, and all of the things. I don't think I need to get into it because I think everybody's heard it. Everybody knows that one or two person in their own circle that has great cynicism around it. Councillor, let me start with you first. How much of our attitude collectively needs to shift? Like how much do we need as civilians, as people, as workers, as skilled tradespersons, as executives, as accountants, as lawyers, need to start buying into or really legitimately considering what an energy transition or an energy future might look like?
Well, Ryan, I am going to turn that over to President McLaughlin, because he lives and breathes this. And I will say that it's a shift that's happening. It's a shift that's happening right now because it's a necessity that we have to go through. We see that with our young people and some of the things that are happening in our communities. We see the cost of it. So I truly believe that that's happening. Every time I look at Twitter or pick up any news releases, I'm seeing some of the very innovative things that are happening. Just today, early this morning, I heard some great news coming out of the hydrogen hub in the heartland of Alberta. And here in Saskatchewan, we're seeing what's going on in our south eastern portion of our province with helium development. So those are the things that are going to move us in that shift. But I know that President Paul would love to come in onto this conversation before we have to leave.
Yeah, well, thanks, and you hit some great points that I'd hit too, and I think that my conversations always around this. Let's find a common language. Carbon sequestration, agricultural operations in Alberta, forestry in northern BC. We've been sequestering carbon, and there's ways for us to work at this conversation. I'm speaking to you on solar right now. We have a geothermal system in my office, and as well as at home, I run on micro wind and micro solar. I still require hydrogen-based carbon-based projects to heat my house. So this is a mass balance conversation. But at the same time, this is, I think, a lot more opportunity than a transition. It's not disruption. It's actually us pivoting and changing and really providing what the market wants. This is what people want. This is what my children's generation wants. And Albertans can do this. We're doing this now. That innovation's occurring. We have the energy. We have the skills. We have an incredible number of people here that have a skilled workforce, and we're moving towards that. So we have to quit taking energy transition as an insult and look at it as an opportunity. We need to find that common language and bridge that. I think the future of Alberta is actually going to continue to use carbon in a mechanism that actually makes this a better world, and we know how to do that as Albertans, for sure.
I can already tell you right now, Sam, that's the clip we're going to use later when we promote this interview. Paul, very well done. Sometimes they just jump right out at us, and we know what we're going to use. That was very well said. Mayor, it's 9:14. We're doing this live Mountain Time, which means that we've got one more minute with you all. So I'm going to give you last word. What would you like to see, on Monday with regards to maybe what we haven't talked about, or what would you like to reiterate that we've just heard?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be part of the solution. I heard that clip too. I thought Paul just nailed it, and so we're looking for $600 million towards the Western Economic Diversification for our regional development agencies. The new Energy Transition Community Fund is moving the conversation from whether we're going to make changes to adapt to a changing future around carbon to how are we going to do it and be part of that solution, knowing that oil and gas will be with us for a long time and we need to support that. But we also know we need to be proactive and be part of the conversations around building solutions, and that our communities want to be on the front lines of helping build those solutions. And so that's the key moment that we're in right now is moving to the conversation about how are we going to do it and how do we make sure the voices of the local communities are on the front lines. And that's what's been so great about rural and urban participation in the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce, bringing these solutions directly to the federal government and to our provincial governments as well.
That is Mayor Charlie Clark out of the city of Saskatoon, Councillor Randy Goulden out of the city of Yorkton, chair of the Western Economic Solutions Taskforce. Paul McLaughlin is president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. Thanks to the three of you for the perspective, for the conversation today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Yeah, this there you go. So Sam, that's a pretty interesting conversation. I really like the way that Paul approaches. I think reasonable. I think accurate in his assessment of what an energy transition is. Stop seeing it as a threat, see it as an opportunity. Recognizing that there's going to be a role for fossil fuels. I think that most. This is an editorial statement on my part. Most reasonable people acknowledge that there is still a future, and in some circumstances and in some contexts, a bullish future for oil and gas. Albeit there's a horizon. There's obviously a window that will ultimately close, just like the families that own the empires in whale fat and blubber that fueled street lanterns. But I had a guy whose family had a bunch of pay phones. They owned a bunch of these payphone opportunities, and asked them how that wound up going. People that own Blockbuster Videos. We've talked about some of these in past shows. But I think that was a reasonable assessment. I think he's right about the opportunity. And of course, our real talkers have some really great points as well. I think it was Greg that I saw back. I'm going off the top of my head here, but he said something along the lines of, why do we keep talking? Here it is. He says, I hate this we're entrepreneurial talk point. He said, if we're all such great entrepreneurs, wouldn't we be divesting from oil and gas naturally? We're not anymore. We're sticking our heels in. Which is an interesting point. I mean, if we're going to celebrate, and this is a conversation about BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, but I think most especially we just focused, based on who we were talking to, on the prairie provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. You do see it a lot. What's Alberta all about? The can-do spirit, the can-do attitude, problem-solving, ingenuity, innovation, the entrepreneurial spirit, like Greg said. And it's true, and there's plenty of evidence there, but if we're going to be honest and introspective and have some real talk, like Greg alludes to, sometimes we don't see a whole lot of a commitment to innovation and to managing adversity and finding silver linings and making lemonade, so to speak. And we see a little bit more angst and anger and a desire to stick to the more traditional ways. I mean, I don't think that that's a controversial statement at all.
Yeah, I guess a big takeaway from this is first of all, I love I do think the narrative has to become, this is an opportunity. This is not a transition. This is not a thing that needs to be viewed as a negative. In terms of that, if we're entrepreneurial, would we be doing this already? We are doing this already. And I say that industry is doing this already. Industry and large financial capital is already divesting from oil and gas and putting all their money into renewables. And so we're in a position right now where the government incentives need to follow that. We're kind of in this place. It's a lot of sunk cost fallacy, which is, sort of the business term for when you've invested in something and you're so tied to the fact that you've put money into this thing, even though it kind of doesn't have value anymore. And the right solution would be to drop it and move on. And I'm not saying Alberta needs to drop and move on from oil and gas. Far from it. It's still an industry that's going to be very important for us for a few decades. I think you and I might disagree on the timeline of that, but we both agree that it's going to be important for a while.
I don't know that we would disagree
right?
on the
Yeah.
timeline. What would you peg the rough timeline at?
I'd say, probably reasonably, I'd say 20 years would be a good framework for Alberta.
Yeah. I think, you look at market indicators, which oftentimes are
Market indicators say it'll be faster.
some of the most important ones,
Yeah.
right? You look at, this is just cherry picking one example, and some would say, well, you're totally oversimplifying the whole argument. And I would say, yeah, you're right. But we can only tackle one thing at a time. Automakers.
Yeah.
That's one example of what automakers are doing. I mean, some of them are saying we'll be completely electric. Our lineup will be completely, we're talking about companies like General Motors. We're not talking
Completely
about
electric by 2035. Right? Yeah.
14 years from now.
I know.
So I mean, my son's 5, he'll be 19. Like, obviously that's a long time from now in one context.
So
I always view life in the family context,
his,
Sam,
like,
but I also think that at the same time, when you look at 14 years, it's also an instant. Like, that's 2007.
So when
to right
Wyatt
now.
graduates university, he's getting like a brand new electric Camaro. Is that what you're telling me here?
Camaro?
Well, we're just talking about GM.
A Camaro. I'm trying to respect to the Camaro. Respect
to
to
the Camaro, hey?
if I
they did actually just discontinue it again.
If I had unlimited funds,
Yeah.
and if I was Jay Leno and I was building a garage like that, I would have a '68 Camaro.
Beauty.
I also love the early '80s. They're not the same, but I understand. But the Trans Am, the Firebird, like,
Yes.
I'm talking with the gold honeycomb wheels, the Firehawk
Well,
on
but
the
I mean,
hood.
the thing is they kind of are the same car, right? I mean, like, Chevy and Pontiac built them on the same chassis.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you start saying that the Camaro and the Firebird are the same car, the audience, the niche that is the Camaro and Firebird crowd will erupt.
Yes.
They will erupt. It's like calling the Ford Tempo and the Mercury Topaz the same thing. They're not! But they are. Have you read The Impact of Green Investors? It's a piece that's just out in The Economist. We're working on putting a segment together on this for next week. But it's interesting. Let me just read a couple of lines. This is out of The Economist. This is out of recent. Sustainable investing is in the firing line, as 2 recent events have shown. Last week, the board of Danone, like yogurt and all the other food, a French food maker, fired its boss, Emmanuel Faber, who had long championed the benefits of stakeholder capitalism and sustainability. Shareholders were unhappy with the firm's languishing share price. The next day, USA Today published an opinion piece by Tariq Fancy, a former head of sustainability at BlackRock, which is big time, the world's biggest asset manager, which says it puts climate change at the center of its investment strategy. You remember when the CEO's annual letter came out from BlackRock talking about pulling investment away from oil and gas? It caused major ripples across Western Canada. Mr. Fancy called investing that takes into account ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors. He called those, quote, this is the former head of sustainability at BlackRock, called ESG as an investment strategy little more than marketing hype, PR spin, and disingenuous promises. He pointed to ESG. Why am I so immature today? I'm being serious. Mr. Fancy said, but it sounds like I'm trying to be critical of it. No, it's his name. Mr. Fancy says that he does. He pointed to these ESG funds that invest in big polluters, like oil firms, and BlackRock, by the way, his former affiliate, says that it disputes the claims. But it's an interesting comment, and The Economist is writing about it. So I'm always curious to know what you think about this. Christina, who's watching live, says, I attended our Corporate Environmental Day webinar. She says we're a multinational company. It says one glaring point was the lack of accessibility of green tech, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan. It says Ontario has nuclear power, as an example, says Christina. So interesting points. We're going to get to some of your emails in just a moment. Of course, wanted to remind you that if you've got a dog, you, of course, I don't have to tell you, they're your family. And you do anything for your family, including ensuring that they're eating the healthiest food, the food that's best for them that you can possibly procure. I encourage you to check out GrandDog.ca. This show is a proud partner of Grand Dog Essentials, quality raw food. And if you use the promo code REALTALK on their website right now, they'll give you 10% off your first order. The order that they deliver right to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, or Central Alberta. We're working with their nutritionists to help our dogs ensure that they have the most custom possible diet. And it doesn't blow the bank either. It'll surprise you. Depending on what your dog needs, this is something you might be able to make happen, and probably will, especially when you consider all things like the health of your family members, The four-legged ones, too. Granddog.ca, where you'll find Grand Dog Essentials. The team at Alta Moving and Storage knows that this is the time of year people are starting the spring cleaning projects. It might be time that you finally decide to transform that one room, the junk room, the storage room, into actual usable space. If you're looking for a storage locker, you'll find them at Alta Moving and Storage. They've also got those pod-style moving containers. They drop them off at your house. You fill them up, or they have hired hands that can help you out. And then they get it to your destination stress-free at altastorage.ca. Appreciated this email to talk at ryanjesperson.com. This is from Chelsea a couple of days ago, and she said, I'll keep this concise, Ryan, as I know you must be drowning in letters and emails. Chelsea says, I'm deeply, deeply concerned that firefighters are not part of the current vaccination schedule. Firefighters tend to be the first to arrive on scene, whether that be to a car accident or a medical call. They're being sent to COVID quarantine hotels, homes, hospitals, care facilities. They're caring for folks that are COVID positive on a daily basis. Many of them live with fear and anxiety about bringing it home to their loved ones, or the potential of being an unknown carrier and spreading COVID to others on the job, as well as vulnerable community members that they support. Chelsea says, although they are important jobs, I am disheartened to see that acupuncturists, chiropractors, massage therapists have been listed before firefighters. She says, make this make sense. She says the Premier has failed to provide a measure of safety for essential frontline workers and the people that they come into contact with. And I hope that the provincial government of Alberta will deeply reflect on this and with a level of immediacy, reconsider that firefighters be included in the current 2C phase. She says, I sign off filled with frustration. Chelsea. I know that we'll probably have acupuncturists and chiropractors and massage therapists that are going, hey, what the hell, man? But it's pretty easy to make the argument that firefighters should be there at the top of the list. They are the first responders, police officers, paramedics. And this was an email that jumped out at us as well. This was from Mike, and Mike's subject line reads, COVID or vaccine deniers. And he says, I'm confused. Through this pandemic, I continue to hear people downplay COVID, oftentimes saying things like it's just a flu, and the amount of people that actually die from it is negligible. But when people are asked about whether or not they're going to get the vaccine, they immediately will say, the same people, hell no. You know, people have been getting blood clots. Some have become very sick or even died from receiving the vaccine. Mike says, as is the case with many, if not all other vaccines, there are minute chances of some form of side effect, but that number is even smaller than what these COVID deniers are basing initial beliefs on. So I'm confused. He said, I'm not concerned, or they're not concerned about COVID because the numbers are apparently so small, but they're terrified about vaccines, even though the numbers are even smaller. One might even say negligible. I think Mike just wanted to see me pronounce that word because he's got a little winky face there. He says these people need to pull their heads out of their asses, and that includes my in-laws. He says it would be a real shame if they couldn't continue to see their year-and-a-half-old granddaughter due to such ignorance. That from Mike. We'll keep his last name out of this. We're not looking to start family fights. It's not every day that we get emails or correspondence from our younger audience members, but I loved this from Margaret C. Margaret C. is a grade 8 student in the Calgary Board of Education. And she writes in to Media Personality Jesperson. She says, I'm a grade 8 student in the CBE, and I'm writing you to express my concern about the new program of education from kindergarten to grade 6 for the French as a first language schools. I myself have attended a Francophone school for several years. Margaret says a couple strengths that I found in the program. There's been appropriate attention to homophones and essential grammatical basics, fixing mispronounced words and anglicisms, and practicing self-evaluation. These are all important for elementary school. Unfortunately, there were some weaknesses, like the need to put more emphasis on verbs throughout all grades. Terms in the knowledge section should be simplified for at-home learning, Terminology should be improved in all grades. There is a certain knowledge lacking. This is a grade 8 student writing this. I'm going to get Margaret to write all my speeches when I have to address groups. There is a certain knowledge lacking from this new curriculum, including summarizing. This should be more apparent in all grades. More time should be put aside for French reading and at-home reading. It should be encouraged. You should be able to choose your own book, and learning presentation skills should be taught earlier. I hope people will take my suggestions into consideration. Sincerely, Margaret C. That is amazing, Margaret. Please do continue to keep in touch. It's amazing to know that the leaders of today and tomorrow are participating in our conversations on Real Talk. Shane says right now live, I'm trying to think of what I was doing in grade 8. I'll tell you what I was doing in grade 8. I was asking my orthodontist for purple and yellow elastics on my braces for the Los Angeles Lakers playoff run. That's what I was doing in grade 8, walking around with a purple and yellow brace set on my teeth. Sam, I suppose in grade 8 you were probably solving high-level
that's fantastic
physics theories and
No, grade 8. What do you learn in grade 8 science? Cell biology, I think.
That might be the amoeba and paramecium conversation
very
we had
well
earlier
could
today.
be. Yeah, no, I was a regular kid in grade 8. I certainly wasn't writing letters to the media. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, isn't that awesome to know that she's watching or listening to this, and probably I hope passing it along to her classmates that this is the type of show that welcomes their feedback, that wants to hear from them. Kim says, I love that letter. Kids are amazing. And by the way, she's right. Terry says, wait, this kid's in grade 8? Is that our next prime minister? Linda Ray says, Jason Ketty is terrified of kids like this.
Yeah.
You're probably right.
I lean personally sometimes where, particularly things like climate change and a lot of social justice issues, like the things that just make me mad on a regular basis. I look at our younger generation and how much more angry they are about it. And I'm just like, the kids are smart. We're going to be all right.
This is an interesting comment. Daniel on our live chat says, I'm watching Aaron O'Toole propose a live carbon plan right now on national news. And he says in the live chat is, well, everybody's glued to what we're talking about, Daniel. But you're right. Aaron O'Toole is releasing it. And it's interesting. This is the type of thing as it happens when we're live. For the most part, we're going to talk about it tomorrow. We're going to get to it tomorrow. But I had an interesting exchange. Let me show you this, Sam. I'm just going to we'll take a second here and I'll share my screen. This guy is, do I call him a political commentator? I guess so. He's an outspoken, and he wouldn't see it as an insult, an outspoken right-winger in Alberta by the name of Corey Morgan, and he's done some work writing for Western Standard. And I know he's probably not everybody's cup of tea. That's totally fine. But I thought that this was an interesting insight into how a lot of people are going to feel about Aaron O'Toole's climate plan. And so, what are you saying? Just say it live because I can't tell what you're
I was saying close your downloads.
Oh, yeah. Who cares? Okay. Yeah. I mean, not who cares. Oh, I didn't see why you want me to close it because of the file name, Naked. Corey Morgan this morning. Not everybody, by the way, hey, for a moment of seriousness, pull this back to us for a second. For a moment of seriousness, I do want to acknowledge in the live chat, actually, a lot of you were totally unimpressed that we shared that photo. So I'll acknowledge that. And we can walk that back. Let me say, this is real talk. This is how I really feel about it. I think it's unfortunate for that MP. I don't think it's a big deal. Some of you said, oh, so he's hot, so it's okay that you share it. That's not the point I made. The point I made was, as a politician, I don't think it's the worst. If you get caught on camera showing off your six-pack, I think it's ridiculous that someone would say he's going to lose his job over it. If anything, he's going to become more popular. But I'll acknowledge, as we did in the chat, that a lot of you said, you know what, shouldn't be sharing that photo. He has not consented to have the photo shared. It shouldn't have been screen grabbed in the first place. Fair enough. We're going to leave that one alone. We're not going to keep talking about it. I do think the situation is a bit unfortunate for him, but I also think it's hilarious. And not everybody finds everything hilarious at the same time, which is totally fine. Let's get back to this. Corey Morgan tweets this morning and says, Aaron O'Toole, leader of Canada's Conservatives, has repackaged Trudeau's carbon tax and will try to sell it to us in the next election. And so I asked Corey, this was like, I don't know, 3 minutes before we went live on the show. I said, honest question. If you could support a party that could achieve government with a climate policy that's saleable to the general public, or support a party that would forever be in opposition, largely based on a principled stand against meaningful climate action or climate policy, would the latter be your choice? And he responded to me and he said, some of the best federal governance we've ever seen in living memory was from the Chrétien Liberals with an effective reform opposition. I prefer to stick on principle. So in his mind, and that's fine, he's entitled to his opinion. I would obviously completely disagree with him. He believes that Preston Manning did such a good job in opposition with the Reform Party of Canada. And maybe Corey might make the argument that Preston Manning paved the way for Stephen Harper to ultimately achieve, with a unified Conservative movement, a majority government. And you could certainly make the argument over time. But this is what a lot of Canada's Conservatives will have to ask themselves. This is what you will have to ask yourself. And that is, with an election that you should have won in 2019, the sitting prime minister had multiple photos and videos of blackface out there. And that was just one thing that you could hit the Trudeau Liberals on at that time. That was just one thing. But he was vulnerable. As Peter MacKay, who missed an open net on a breakaway, said about Andrew Scheer, the Conservatives missed an open net on a breakaway. And if you and you'll say, well, we got the most votes. And that's true. But you didn't get them where you needed them. Like, absolutely dominated the prairies, where you typically always dominate, with the exception of 4 Liberal MPs in 2015 out of Alberta. And maybe we'll see a couple more depending on who accepts nominations and who runs for the Liberals next federal election. I think we could see some interesting names. I think we might see some pretty familiar political names out of the province of Alberta involved in the next federal election. Hint, hint. But for the most part, Conservatives, as people say, could run a blue painted cardboard box in a lot of ridings and win. You need the votes in Vancouver and Montreal and rural Quebec and Toronto and the Maritimes. And what do voters there say? And what did they tell pollsters after the election? They didn't perceive the Conservatives to have a legitimate climate plan. That's what they said. And if there was one, they would consider voting for the party. And the party might win. And the party might form government. And I find it really hard to believe, well, maybe I shouldn't. Because we see it in Alberta all the time. And quite frankly, we're watching the early stages of the United Conservative Party fall apart again. And there will be a spin-off movement. And maybe by the next provincial election, there's 17 MLAs that signed their name to a letter that has basically earned their way out of a potential cabinet position for the rest of the time that Jason Kenney has any influence in Alberta's provincial politics. Says to me that some folks are pretty much sitting with their bags packed at the door right now, ready to go. So maybe there are people that would rather stand on principle and stick to their guns on absolutely everything and never achieve government. But I think that Aaron O'Toole right now is doing what his advisors and what he probably realizes he has to do if he ever wants to be Prime Minister of Canada. What do you think?
I want to ask a broader question that has been kind of sitting with my mind for a while, and it's just the question of, like, in Canada, do united right-leaning parties work? And I say that because we've seen cycles over and over and over again where, in the 80s we had the PCs and the Reforms, and they realized that to form government they had to merge, so we created the new Conservative Party of Canada. They've had one successful leader, one very unsuccessful leader, and one leader trying to break some new ground in a little bit more of a centrist thing. Then you look at Alberta, and you look at how the conservative side of the aisle in Alberta was fractured into the Wild Rose and the long-standing PC government, and decided that their only way back to the legislature was unity. And the moment they got into power, the cracks inside the party started to fall, and people are starting to talk about fractures again. And I ask as a very honest question as a political watcher in Canada, if there just isn't enough room for a big tent Conservative Party when we have two very split bases, So that's kind of my macro view of this, is that I think that, on a level as a person that personally doesn't really support the Conservatives, I'm really, really happy to see them taking climate change seriously, putting market-based solutions on the table, using carbon pricing as an effective tool towards it. I think that is, backed by world economists, one of the directions we need to go in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that there's a part of their base that will see that as a reason to walk away from them. And I don't know how you reconcile those things.
Greg, I mean, I feel like if we had our, if we had sort of like a comment of the day or a commenter of the Real Talker of the day or Real Talker of the week, Greg would qualify because I think this is his third comment that I've read this morning. But I appreciate what he's bringing to the conversation. He wonders, why can't conservatives be fresh with ideas? Why is it always a we don't like the liberal approach to whatever conversation? Whatever happened to being original and bringing in new ideas?
Because the distaste for the other parties kind of really seems to be the dominant uniting force with conservatives in Canada.
It's how
Right?
politicians can score points.
Exactly. It's the Conservative Party is very much less about conservative principles or market-based principles or whatever it is that they say they are, and more about hating Trudeau.
Yeah. Blaine is watching, says, the problem with Justin Trudeau, in my opinion, says Blaine, is too much style and not enough substance. His cabinet, his party have the substance to back him up, but he himself strikes me as an empty suit. That from Blaine. Daniel says, are you saying a blue Dodge pickup is a cardboard box? Speaking of Dodge pickups, you can find the best selection. I know it wasn't even time for this, but it was on a silver platter. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? I'm obviously going to remind you that the team at Sherwood Dodge and St. Albert Dodge have literally the best selection when it comes to the Dodge Ram lineup, the Ram 15, 25, and 3500 of any dealerships in the province. And of course, because they work together, if they don't have it on one lot, they probably have it on the other. Now's a great time to check them out with awesome financing options. And while you're there, ask them about the Jeep lineup as well. They're ready to go. 2021's a huge year. I can't wait to see the Grand Wagoneer. I'm waiting for the first one I see on the road. That's always a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because we see the mock-ups, we see the, everybody gets the track photos. A car driver will tweet them out and say, ooh, our first look at the Ford Bronco. And then I saw the Ford Bronco on the road the other day and I went, eh. It's like, eh. The Grand Wagoneer, this new Jeep one, we're talking back in the day, this was like the SUV, before people called them SUVs.
Oh yeah, back when they had the big,
Right,
they
the
were
wood
the OG
paneling?
wood paneling.
Yes!
And that's like, okay, we've been doing ads for St. Albert Dodge since we launched, and you've been bringing up the Grand Wagoneer, and I've been hesitant to say I'd like to see one with wood paneling.
Why?
But I'm going to say it straight up.
Sam!
I want to see a wood panel one.
Absolutely! Are you kidding me? I can't remember the guy's name. I mean, I remember his real name, Richard Dreyfuss, but the character he played in What About Bob with Bill Murray? And you remember Bob is his patient and he keeps showing up at the cabin? And Richard Dreyfuss, whatever his character is, he drives a Grand Wagoneer, like an old school. I remember it. It's like a cultural icon. This commercial's like 4 minutes long. The Grand Wagoneer's coming back out. Make sure to check it out. Sherwood St. Albert Dodge. Also want to remind you that the team at Park Power with the promo code 2021-REAL-TALK at parkpower.ca is prepared to refund $70 off your first bill when you bring your electricity, natural gas, or what did I miss? Electricity, natural gas, and internet business over to them at parkpower.ca. They take 10% of their profits, right? So you can be a part of this. You are a part of this. 10% of your profits go back to the nonprofits. You got to get your natural gas, your internet, your electricity from somebody. Why not save $70 right now off your bill using 2021-REAL-TALK at parkpower.ca. Wanted to read a couple of emails before we start talking about, I'm looking forward to this conversation it's a conversation about rural crime, but it's more than that. And I know Geoff Morrison will get into it. He's the filmmaker. He's the producer of a series called Farm Crime. And they've just released season 2 on CBC Gem, but they do talk about rural crime, and we'll get into that. And I know it'll be of interest to a lot of you, but also really unique story angles like murder hornets and baby eels and wild stuff. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. Always want to remind you how much we appreciate you being in touch with the show. So much so that Sam has designed a brand new, awesome graphic that we can overlay over our YouTube broadcast. Look at this. You thought we were big time when we had studio lights. You thought we were big time when we had more computers than we need. You thought we were big time because we have leather studio chairs. Once you start superimposing graphics on your YouTube feed, ladies and gentlemen, one has arrived. You can talk to us using the hashtag RealTalkRJ. You can find us at RyanJesperson.com. And, of course, our email is talk@RyanJesperson.com. That's where Cheryl found us yesterday. And she said, thank you so much for profiling the very real concerns of improper budgeting. yesterday at the University of Alberta's Faculty of Law. It was a tuition roundtable. Their tuition's going up 45%, and that's not even the highest bump up on the campus. Some people are seeing tuition up in the 65% range. Wild. Cheryl says, I'm a graduate of the Faculty of Law, and I've seen firsthand the homogeneous nature. The homogeneity. I said that right. Huh?
You did say that right.
Homogeneity.
It's a tough word. Yeah.
The homogeneity that already exists in this faculty. Cheryl's way smarter than me, obviously. She wonders, how do we create an equitable, diverse, and inclusive society when those who govern our laws are homogenous? How do our leaders and lawmakers understand oppression if they have only known privilege? It's not enough to say that we must make room for heterogeneous access to justice. We have to consciously create space. But if those who grew up in oppression and poverty do not have the same opportunities, do we really mean what we say? Or is it just token lip service? Lip service that continues to quietly support white privilege. When I entered law school in 2006, tuition had just doubled. I was in my 30s with a young family. I refinanced my home because the available scholarships and bursaries were not enough to cover tuition and living costs. I was surrounded by students raised in white privilege. I was surrounded. And I wasn't even neurodivergent or trans or a person of color. It takes no education at all to understand that the law faculty is improperly addressing budget constraints by creating a class system that will harm our society in substantive ways. As the haves grow, the have-nots will be crushed. All of this while the Faculty of Law claims to care about equity, diversity, and inclusion. To the Faculty of Law, your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying. Cheryl says, thanks to Real Talk for ongoing support of diverse voices. I appreciate that. That's a powerful letter. I read that and I just went, whoa. I mean, why did I put it on the floor? Let me read that again. How do we create an equitable, diverse, and inclusive society when those who govern our laws are homogenous? How do our leaders and lawmakers understand oppression if they have only known privilege? That is we should take that and we should stamp that on the side of a building. That should be a mural. That should be something that we all stare at every time we make our way around or check our Instagram feed, for that matter. That's the new advertising.
Can I shamelessly plug something right now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just because I was cutting it yesterday. We've talked about it on the show before. I'm working with YWCA Edmonton and Parity Yeg on Searching for Izina, a project all about the history of women on city council and women just in government in the Edmonton area. Our next episode that comes out last week, that I actually just finished the post on yesterday, is all about the unbelievably shameful statistic that we have never had a woman of color or an Indigenous woman on council in this city. We break down stories.
Like never, ever.
Like never, ever. We talk to the first woman of color, to ever run in Edmonton. She actually lives in India right now. She's fantastic. We do a roundtable conversation with some women that have run and unsuccessfully went through it. It is a fascinating episode. It's out next Tuesday. Very good if you want to lean a little bit more into the idea of having diverse voices in government, because it's so important.
Love it, Sam. Nice job. And a shout out to the entire team that's been working on that podcast. It's important to understand those stories. And sometimes, something may have been fact for like 100 years, but it flies under our radar, like what you just reminded us of there. And I think it's so important, especially with municipal elections coming up. It's something that should be on people's minds. This is a really neat film project. It's been undertaken by a guy by the name of Geoff Morrison of Big Cedar Films. They've just launched their second season. It's a documentary series called Farm Crime. It's a CBC doc that you can find on CBC Gem. They talk about everything from cattle rustling to fancy pigeons. I have no idea what that is, but we're going to find out. And of course, some of the other stories that typically don't get told until documentary filmmakers get involved. It's a real pleasure to welcome Geoff Morrison to the show. First of all, congratulations on season 2 of Farm Crime. That's got to be pretty exciting stuff as a producer.
Thanks, Ryan. Producing a show during a pandemic is a real trip. So yeah, I'll take that. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Did you do all filming? I mean, this is season 2. Did you do all filming pre-pandemic, or have you been able to find a way to work throughout, or how have you managed that?
We did 5 of 6 episodes during the pandemic. We filmed an episode last winter in February in Nova Scotia, and then we're basically down until August, and then picked up again in August in Nanaimo, and then filmed right through December. I think our last shoot was in Alberta actually in early December, as like COVID cases were just just accelerating, and it was stressful, terrifying, and yeah, everyone had to adapt to filming with like new procedures and safety measures, and we did it, thankfully. And I mean, post-production was a whole nother journey, but I mean, people are getting it done. So
well, and it's amazing to be able to keep creative professionals working. And people that work in film and TV, to be able to keep them working through the pandemic, because it's one of those industries, it's actually, I think in a way, similar to oil and gas, in that there were economic realities and there were a lot of difficulties that people were facing before the pandemic hit. The pandemic just made it tougher.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of industries that thankfully have been able to soldier on and find a way to do it safely. The film and television industry, for sure. I mean, in Ontario, in Alberta too. I mean, the industry is really blowing up in Alberta right now. Really needed to keep going. And thankfully they've found a way to do it safely, and the government stepped in with an insurance backstop. So, I mean, we count ourselves lucky that the industry has been able to continue producing shows.
Geoff, I've seen that from a number of people. We probably have a bunch of mutual friends, but a bunch of people that are actually pretty excited about some of the activity that they're seeing in film right now, and in particular in Alberta. I know that they'll tell probably similar stories in BC and other regions in Canada. What do you think? Why is that? What's prompting this? That's great news for people that have something to offer but haven't been able to find a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I think Canada has been able to continue with the industry, whereas a lot of other places, California has had to really shut down. So there's been opportunities to keep filming. A lot of American shows are coming up here, especially shooting in Alberta and BC and Ontario. Studio spaces are blowing up. There's a new service provider that's coming into Alberta as well. And then we're also seeing investment from the government. I mean, we're getting into the finance side of all this, but they see the economic benefits of investing in the industry and by providing those tax credits. So I think that's why there's really an interest in keeping it going and, bringing as much, products and as many shows as possible.
Geoff, how do you...
But then you have your homegrown shows as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on, and there is a lot of opportunity. And then with all these new platforms, I mean, CBC Gem, if you would have asked somebody a number of years ago, nobody would even really know what that is. I mean, it's amazing to see how people pivot and how new opportunities have been made available. When it comes to farm crime, I guarantee you a lot of people would say, good. I mean, okay, good. So Real Talk is going to bring in this guy. We're going to talk about farm crime, and we're going to talk about rural crime, which is a real thing. And Ryan will probably steer the conversation to talk about an Alberta police force, because people say that the RCMP is inadequate. And we'll probably talk about firearms legislation because and I can see Geoff's eyes going, oh geez. No.
Do you want to talk about
but no, I do want to talk about it. But I guess what I'm doing is I'm teeing this up to say your show, your series is about so much more than typical conversations might be when it comes to farm crime. What gave you the idea to do this, or how did this come about?
I kind of look back a couple of years ago. I mean, we're going back almost 10 years ago. The maple syrup theft in Quebec was this huge agricultural crime. And I heard about it and I was like, this is fascinating, as if someone came up with the idea to steal $18 million worth of maple syrup, and as if an agricultural product can be worth that much money. And what I also found interesting was the coverage of it. It's like, oh, it's hilarious. It's maple syrup. This is so funny. People stole all this maple syrup. But of course, there were real victims at the heart of this. People who had sent their syrup off to the Federation, or other people who had gotten caught up in trying to buy some of this stolen syrup. And so I saw the real hard cost involved in that particular incident, and then started noticing more agricultural crimes, and also the tone in which they were being told, whether it was in a small town newspaper, or, occasionally they get picked up and go viral by a bigger media outlet. And I thought, well, wouldn't this be an interesting subject to explore in documentary? And instead of like, having this kind of light tone. Let's look at these incidents seriously. Let's tell these victim stories. Let's validate these stories, because they're fascinating. I mean, I make no bones about it. I'm a city guy. I grew up in and around Toronto, and the show inherently has that lens of someone who's like curious about learning about rural communities and these types of incidents. And I think if there's a way to bring them to, especially like urban audiences that might not know about the cattle industry or, the bee industry or some of the aquaculture industries we get into in the show, and do it in a way that is serious and respectful, but also has a bit of that kind of like true crime storytelling. It just seemed like kind of an interesting package, an interesting way to do it.
Yeah. So I want to get into some of the specific episodes because I know there's amazing stories to tell, but quite frankly, you've indicated that you're up for talking about what some might describe as an epidemic of rural crime, the prominence of rural crime, the frustration that we see with some rural landowners, and as a matter of fact, political representatives, elected representatives in a lot of rural communities. They're dissatisfied with police coverage. They're dissatisfied that if they put out a call to the RCMP that they believe that their property is being compromised. In other words, they believe that their family may be at risk, and it's an active situation that sometimes it takes 45 or 60 or 120 minutes for police to arrive. It's impacting people's perspectives on firearms, and it's impacting people's perspectives. I mean, the Colton Boushey story in Saskatchewan is a deadly serious example of how some of these situations wind up. I would imagine you've heard, as in producing this project, story after story. How would you assess right now how rural residents, how farmers, so to speak, landowners are feeling in the communities that you've visited?
There's a few instances. I mean, I didn't direct all these episodes, so I wasn't in the field for all of them. But one of the first episodes we shot for the first season was in Alberta, and it involved a rancher who had 50 of his cattle stolen. I mean, I'll give it away a bit. The episode's called Cattle Cops, and it's as much about this rancher who had these cattle stolen as it is about Alberta's livestock investigation detail, this like small 2-person detail from the RCMP. It's a very fascinating thing to learn about how policing works in livestock. And I'll tell you, I mean, this guy did not feel safe being out there knowing that the police were 20, 30 minutes away. And so I think I'm speaking anecdotally from what I've heard. I'm not an expert. Again, I live in the city where, there's a police station like 5 minutes away. So I'm never going to experience something like that. But I think from what I've heard in those few instances is people are scared and they feel as though they need a right to protect themselves. And it's a very complicated issue. I mean, I'm not the right person to kind of like weigh in on that, but I think their voices are being heard, and the issue is coming up again and again.
Yeah, and I think, whether it's anecdotally or otherwise, you're hearing these stories, and you have, to a certain degree, your finger on the pulse of it, and I think you have an informed opinion. So I think that a lot of this is, if you talk to the appropriate people to talk to on an issue like this, you're going to get so many different perspectives on what an effective approach would look like. Right? I mean, some people might say, well, it should be a more, an Alberta-based police force with more robust expenditures and better representation at the local level. And then the counterpoint to that, there are many. It's way more expensive. It decreases the efficiency of the RCMP. Albertans never asked for it. You talk about firearms ownership. People are going to have many different opinions on that. I talk to a lot of rural people. Yeah. I remember one guy, Jeff, I'll never forget this. In my previous radio show, I'm talking to a guy about firearm ownership. And he said to me something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And he says, when you see a coyote literally attacking a calf as it's being born, you tell me I don't need a long gun. And I went, yeah, this guy's walking in different boots than I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Interestingly, I also in the past 2 years produced a film about policing in Calgary and policing in Alberta and more in urban centers, and looked at some of the issues that the Calgary Police Force specifically is facing with respect to oversight and excessive force, and some of the failures of the oversight bodies in Alberta. Is actually a subject that I feel more qualified to speak on than I do on rural policing. One thing I'll say about farm crime is we have a pretty broad interpretation of what a farm crime can be for the show. And so there are some rural crime incidents, but there's also aquaculture incidents and in the new season, we have some incidents involving invasive species like, the Asian giant hornet, the murder hornet in British Columbia. So, I mean, there's a lot to it. And I hear that farmer, like, yeah, you see a coyote attacking one of your animals. Like, what are you going to do in that case? You're going to want to intervene. So
Barry Fearnley is watching the show. He's a farmer. He farms goats, as a matter of fact, and he says farm crime is almost as costly to us as the carbon tax. Barry doing a nice job of interweaving our subjects of conversation today. Daniel says in northern Alberta, it's much more than vehicles and fuel theft. He says there is some rustling. Says horses and cows are often shot just for target practice. He says now that's a crime. Right? How about this from Kim, who says, my husband was helping my dad with calving after a hip surgery, and we had an attempted theft. Says my husband actually chased him off in his Toyota Supra, great car, by the way, and says until they ran him into the ditch. No cell service, middle of winter. She says, luckily, it's funny. We can laugh about it now. But I mean, it just goes to show that, there's, Blaine says there's a big misunderstanding about the root problems with rural policing and rural crime. He says very few people actually understand it's a problem from provincial funding and support, not from the federal government. We get some really interesting comments here on how people might address this, how people might solve this. Have you picked up on a common theme from the people that you talk about? I mean, maybe aside from the fact that they're frustrating or they've been impacted by what would qualify as farm crime for the series, has there been a common message?
I think the message is like, it's one of like frustration. A lot of these agricultural products that are stolen might be really hard to trace. And when we talk about rural crime, it's hard to police both from a law enforcement is not nearby. And I mean, we're not in an urban place where there's cameras everywhere. So investigating these crimes is difficult in rural areas, certainly, and certainly on farms. And again, we looked at incidents where stolen cattle. I mean, there's a story in the new season of farm crime about 3 paint horses that were stolen. The horses weren't branded, and so how is a livestock investigator, someone can be able to track those animals down if they're not branded? Thankfully, they paint horses, so they're branded just by the nature of their colorings. But
Geoff, that was the story. Wasn't that the story? They were stolen from a Nakota elder, correct?
That's correct.
The paint horses, was there a cultural significance to that, or can you take us into that story? That sounded like a really interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, it took place in the Morley First Nation. This was last spring. Nakota elder, woke up one morning and noticed that 3 of his horses were missing. I mean, it's not unusual for the horses to wander off from time to time, but he had a feeling that this was a little bit different, and I think his instincts were backed up in other ways as well. And he started talking about it with his daughter, who also had a very strong relationship with the horses. And I mean, both of them had spent their entire lives around around paint horses on the Stoney Nakota First Nation. And so, I mean, when his daughter saw how heartbroken he was about these horses, at this point, just having gone missing, she said, you know what, I'm going to try and figure this out. I'm going to try and find them. And she did everything she could to try and find these horses. I mean, reaching out to someone from LIS, reaching out to a meatpacking plant, talking to people that are involved in sort of the informal like horse trading network, which is very fascinating to learn about. And then, of course, also posting on social media, which is, I guess, if you want to touch on another common theme, social media has also been another big thing that I've seen in some of the farm crimes in terms of people trying to find their missing product or missing animal, posts on Facebook or Instagram or wherever it is. And also a lot of people posting stolen goods on Kijiji. We've had a couple incidents where things have been posted on Kijiji. The Cattle Cops episode for the first season involved the perpetrator like trying to post these cattle on Kijiji. And I mean, it's not the smartest thing to do, like when you're trying to cover your tracks and and get rid of some stolen property. But
yeah, I mean,
at the same time, I guess.
Although, how else do you? I mean, you need. I'll just be honest. I'm so ignorant about this type of stuff. It's why I think your series is great. It's why I love conversations like this. It's why I'm keeping a keen eye on our live chat, because our rural friends and our audience members are speaking right now in real time, giving their stories. And Jeff, I'll infuse some of those into our conversation. I hope you don't have anywhere to go. Is your morning fairly flexible? Because we kind of roll however we like here on the show. I can.
No, it's good.
Okay. I mean, I'm not talking 3 hours, but this is really fascinating, and people are coming alive and telling their stories. But I would be fascinated to see, I mean, you talk about the cattle cops, or you talk about what did you call them? The RCMP's Livestock Investigation Bureau. You said there's 2 of them. Are they like totally overworked? Is that the sense you get? Is this a thing? Like, is there a whole, do I just not even understand there's a whole black market? How do you rustle? Did you say 50 cattle? 50?
Yeah.
What?
So, I mean, I'll take you through it. I mean, this happened a couple of years ago, and the rancher and his wife had gone on vacation, and their ranch hand, was living in like a small house on the property. He had I think 5 kids. He was there with his wife. These are all. Here's another theme. These are all heartbreaking stories. There's victims at the heart of all these stories, and people that are being taken advantage of. And in this case, the ranch hand saw an opportunity and put 50 head of cattle up on Kijiji and found buyers. He took the rancher's trailer and transported the animals. And by the time the rancher came back, him and his family were gone. And the rancher had no idea what to do. So he called up his local RCMP detachment thinking, okay, I'm going to report this to the police. As is the typical response, often those detachments are overwhelmed. They don't have a lot of resources to devote to agricultural crime. That's just it is what it is. And thankfully, someone passed on the phone number to the RCMP livestock investigator. And at this point, I think there was only one. I think there are now 2 in the province. I think there's one in BC, and I think they were trying to get one in Saskatchewan as well. And this investigator picked up the case, and he drove out, a couple hours to meet with the rancher, and started looking into it. Started looking into phone records. Ultimately, found the ad on Kijiji through cell. This is also quite fascinating. It's kind of the combination of. I think the episode talks about solving the crime with old Western know-how and then modern crime-solving technology. So I think he ended up using cell phone tower pings to track down the location of the perpetrator, the guy who stole the cattle, and was able to go up there and arrest him. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, so this last summer when we were, trying to get back into production, I phoned up the livestock investigator, and I mean, thankfully we're into the 2nd season now, so we have a couple of relationships, and I called her up and I said, hey, have you been working on anything recently? And she told me about 2 cases, a big bust in Saskatchewan, which is still going through the courts. So it was kind of like not the right fit for us. And then also this story, the 3 paint horses being stolen, and her involvement in that case and trying to find the horses and bring them back. And I mean, it's really, I mean, again, for me and from my perspective, growing up around the city, it's fascinating to hear about this livestock investigation detail and the work that they do and the type of techniques that they use to solve these crimes.
It's actually,
so I mean, to everyone who's listening, like, know that they're out there and
yeah,
they're there to serve you,
Yeah, and also heads up, if you see a great price on 50 cattle in Kijiji, maybe buyer beware,
Yeah, for sure.
but hey, in all seriousness, I mean, I don't know what sort of the cost of beef is at right now or something, but am I safe to assume that if we say, they're approximately, let me say roughly worth between $2,000 and $3,000 a pop, maybe I'm pricing it over, maybe I'm under, I'm not sure. I'm not a cattle rancher, but you're talking about a theft of between $100,000 and $150,000, assuming that they didn't steal genetic treasures as well, which could triple that cost.
I mean, I have no idea what the price is.
I have no idea.
With respect to the genetic treasures, I mean, we tried really hard to put together a bull semen case, and we're not able to. Just another fascinating thing to hear, to learn about is the value in some of these, as you say, genetic treasures.
Yeah. Let's go into the bull semen story. And there's gonna be like, I've been trying not to be immature like a 9-year-old all show today with my hot takes, but so I'll avoid all of the puns. But in all seriousness, if you have a what do you call them, like a donor bull or a stud or whatever they call them, I'm a city slicker, pardon me. I mean, they could be worth like probably $1 million, right? I mean, this is a huge deal.
I mean, potentially. I know there's been some big thefts in the States. There was one in California and one in Minnesota. There's a company that's trying to do a version of the farm crime show in the States right now, and they're developing it. But the ones in Canada, I think there was one in Manitoba that was like 20 years ago. So it did not, end up being a viable story for the show.
Okay. So to give you an idea, I'm just referencing news out of Australia. Here's a story this is from May of 2019. So it's a bit dated, but the record was broken at a sale. Bull semen at auction, Wagyu cattle. So obviously like a pretty high profile beef breed there, but $67,000, not for the bull, for the semen. So, that gives some perspective on the value here that we're talking about.
And I mean, that's it. Here's another theme. Like all these crimes are motivated by money, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. In some of these instances, like, the first season we did a story about, I guess, what is, become known as like the biggest bee heist in Canadian history. This 4-generation independent apiary in Quebec had 5 million of their bees stolen, valued at $200,000. And they're one of the biggest like independent apiaries in Canada. So, heartbreaking story, but a tremendous amount of money that's actually involved.
No kidding. And I mean, it's no wonder. I mean, so you've got the fiscal loss, the loss to your bottom line. There's the disheartening loss if you're losing genetics or anything like that. And then there's the sense of people not feeling safe, right? Like Miles says right now, crime reduction is a multifaceted thing. We can't just pop down more police everywhere, ignore root causes of why people are getting desperate and resorting to this crime. Which is a great point. Ytrium says we've had vehicles stolen. We've had our farm equipment broken into. My grandma's place was broken into 3 times. Says police response times are a huge issue, and there's really no good way around that with such a large area to cover. I mean, that's just a reality. Rural members of our audience are going to say, well, I mean, they'll acknowledge that when you move out there. I've always thought, one of the things that would always be in the back of my mind with loved ones, this is not really profound, Jeff, but with loved ones that live so far away from services, including police, but also hospital, rural people that live in rural areas acknowledge that certain things, if you have a devastating health incident, a stroke or a heart attack, I mean, that's another thing. You're out there on your own to a certain degree, right? And it probably impacts your mindset in a certain way of how you protect yourself, how you protect your family. And I'm not just talking physically, and I'm not just saying from crime. But it would. You're talking to people here. You're interviewing people. You're featuring people as part of your doc that have to be wired a little bit differently.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, the show comes at it from a real perspective of respect and curiosity, because I mean, for the most part, myself and the other directors that have been involved in this project, not all of us have had that lived experience. And so, one of the challenges and I think opportunities with the show is in trying to like translate and bring those stories to an urban audience and help people who have those same questions and that same curiosity, understand these experiences a little bit better.
Well, you do.
But I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say another thing you touched on, there's the financial side of it too, but there's also just the sense of security and, being a victim of one of these crimes. And I think one of the things that really emerged in the first season when we were working on this show is that, it didn't necessarily, in terms of a storytelling perspective, it didn't necessarily matter what the value of the crime was. The show is much more about, sharing the experiences of these victims. And, no matter whether it's, $10,000 or $100,000 that's been stolen from you, you've still been a victim of crime. You've been you've been victimized in some way. And so the stakes, no matter what, are going to be high when you're involved in something like that. And so from a storytelling perspective, I mean, it doesn't matter, whether it's, home invasion or $100,000 or $1 million. There's a victim there, and to be able to tell their story and validate their story is become a big part of what this show is about.
Yeah.
And getting those stories out there.
Our live chat is talking about the Great Pyrenees breed. I was talking to a farmer off the show about this a while ago, and he was telling me about how Great Pyrenees are. We were talking specifically about protection from coyotes, and he was talking to me about how the Great Pyrenees are amazing. He says to me, he goes, there are a few breeds that can defend themselves against a coyote attack. There are a few breeds, he said, for sure. He said, but Great Pyrenees love killing them. And I went, oh, okay, like they're on another level. He says, but these aren't, you don't raise them. He had some experience, and he says you don't raise them like you would. They're not your family dog. They're not in the house, called Lucky, and you're scratching them behind their ears, and then they run out to fight the coyotes. They're from puppies. They're put in with the cattle, and they're raised with the cattle, and they are farm animals. They're working dogs with the cattle, and that's how they protect them. I thought it was really fascinating, just steps that people take. Can we get into some of your episodes? Like, I'm curious to know, when I think of farm crime, I don't think of murder hornets, so to speak, but how did this story come about? This is a fascinating one.
Oh, it's nuts. I mean, last spring, everyone was at home. We were all terrified about what was going on with the pandemic. And can people hear the clip right now?
Yeah, no, we're not. No, you know why? Actually, Jeff, to tell you the truth, is because it puts us more susceptible to the algorithm actually suspending our account for copyright violation. But we'll share that you have shared this with us, and we're running this with your permission.
By all means. And so anyway, this story about murder hornets came out. I don't know if it was the New York Times that first reported on it. This was last May, and everyone was terrified about what was going on in the world. And here's another threat. And I started to read more about this story and realized that, 9 months earlier, there was a group of 4 beekeepers in Nanaimo that had discovered an Asian giant hornet nest. It was the first discovery in North America. And there was an alert that was put out from the chief apiarist in British Columbia. And a local expert said, hey, listen, if we don't take out this nest right away, these new queens are going to emerge. The hornets are going to propagate, and they're going to spread throughout the region. It's going to be a disaster. Now, Asian giant hornets are a highly invasive species. They hadn't previously been in North America before. They're known to decimate honeybee populations. And I think everyone is kind of familiar with a lot of the threats that honeybees face. And so it became this urgent thing that needed to be dealt with. And so when I heard about this experience of these beekeepers and this story that had taken place, 9 months before the murder hornet phenomenon blew up, it just seemed like an amazing story to be able to tell through the show. And also kind of an opportunity to do a different kind of farm crime. So the victim in this case, of course, are the local beekeepers, but the real victim is the honeybees and the honeybee population. And the perpetrator is this invasive species. So it gave us kind of a different way of orienting around a farm crime story.
Yeah, very.
And it unfolds like a thriller in some ways. It's really quite fascinating.
The world of again, I'm oftentimes in conversations with guests, I offer the least profound elements of the conversation, but the world of bees and beekeeping is so fascinating. Hey, I know you were talking about earlier, you talked to those that had the apiary as well. And you've obviously had some exposure to this world, but the dynamics of the bee population and how, to a certain degree, some beekeepers, their hearts are in their throats a little bit through the winter to see which hives survive into the spring, and the way that swarms are captured and bought and sold and queens introduced, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's it's fascinating. There's actually, I think CBC has another documentary that takes you through a year in the life of a bee, of a simple drone, and from the perspective of the bee. It's quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah.
But I think, for people that are, that put so much of themselves, and here's another theme, they put so much of themselves into their work, and there's a lot of hobby beekeepers out there as well, but to learn about yet another threat against the honeybee. And I think, the reason why the Asian giant hornet got this nickname is because of how they attack the honeybee. They essentially they bite off their heads and take the food back to feed their young. So I mean, sure, it's done in a murderous way, and so that's how they got the nickname and how the nickname stuck. But I mean, this is David Attenborough. This is the natural world, It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. You talk about, you get into stolen lobsters. You talk about, obviously, stolen horses. What about this? There was if I understand correctly, a multi-million-dollar trafficking ring that was broken up at a baby eel fishery. This isn't your boring everyday 6 o'clock news story.
No, I'd question the listeners. It's not a clip from the show.
No, I don't know. Was that Billy Idol or who? I was looking away off camera.
I think that was actually from Disruptor Conductor.
Oh, Disruptor Conductor.
That was still in my Q stack.
That was another.
Sorry about that.
No, don't apologize. It gives me an opportunity to remind everybody that our interview with Daniel Bartholomew Poyser, who's a wonderful, he's a childhood friend of mine, and he's one of Canada's only black, gay, out orchestra conductors, and he's just an amazing human being. Geoff, he was actually featured. Disruptor Conductor is a CBC Gem doc, and he joined us a little while ago, and just another example of great storytelling. But these baby eels, what's the deal?
Here's another story. We do a lot of research for the show, and I had come across an investigative piece by a journalist named Richard Cuthbertson out of Halifax about a trafficking bust in the baby eel fishery. And so, what is the baby eel fishery? I had never heard of it before. I suspect that most Canadians have not heard of the baby eel fishery before. It's very small. There are 9 commercial license holders in the Maritimes. The baby eel, or elver, or the American eel, really, is also a threatened species, threatened by poachers, threatened by overfishing. I think there are also some environmental concerns. But here was this story about someone who was trying to sell hundreds of kilograms of baby eels. And so, even to kind of understand, how do you get up to $1 million with the baby eels? So threatened species, there is high demand for eel meat in Asia. But here's the thing, eels cannot be bred in captivity. And so to fuel the Asian market, they need to buy eels or when they are babies, or they're elvers, and they're caught in Canada and along the east coast of the United States and shipped over and then raised in fish farms. And so demand for them is very high. It's been very high in Europe as well, and so high that it led to the closure of the fishery there. They're now endangered in Europe. And so the price of, as of a couple of years ago, the price of baby eels could be as high as $4,500 a kilogram. This is an insane amount of money. And so naturally, people that know where to fish them and know how to fish them are poaching, and they're stealing baby eels because there's so much money involved. And so this is the story of a poacher that had a couple hundred kilograms of baby eels. And you can quickly do the math and figure out how much that is worth, who tried to sell them on the black market. And I won't go too deep into it, but when you try to sell them on the black market, there's not many places you can take them outside of the commercial fishers, the people that have a distribution channel anyway. And so when they found out this guy was trying to sell them, naturally they ratted him out, because the fishery needs to be protected. It's so fragile. And to catch this poacher, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans launched a sting operation and went undercover.
Wow.
And it all unfolds at a gas station on the border of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And I'll leave it there.
Great hook. That
Unbelievable.
was excellent. I was just waiting to hear how it all goes down. But of course, we have to watch Farm Crime Season 2 on CBC Gem. I was just, actually, to be honest, I'll admit, my mind was wandering the tiniest little bit as you were describing it. And I was thinking how this is such a great movie plot, but carried out by animated, like, ocean dwelling. Like, I'm thinking, like, what's that, Finding Nemo? Like that style of movie, but about the theft of baby eels. And I just think that, I don't know. This is the way my mind works sometimes, Geoff. I know it's not not your wheelhouse.
Perhaps.
Maybe I might steal the story from you and produce the film and go on to make hundreds of millions of dollars. How about that? Maybe that's what'll happen.
Well then.
Yeah. I love what you're doing, because the series is unpredictable. Like, you touch on the issues that are, like, these are important. It's not a joke. I mean, the health of the fisheries and the industry and that's not a joke, but it's such an intriguing story that if you say farm crime and people are picturing quads getting stolen or gas getting stolen, like that's not what this is. You must learn something every day at your job. We endeavor to do that here. I bet you do.
I mean, that's it. It's been an amazing project to work on. You know, for each story that has actually gone into production and been filmed, there's been 20 other ones that we've tossed out. And I mean, again, at the heart of it, there's these are like victim stories. And sure, I just told you about the most, exciting and enticing detail, that baby eel story. Well, there's another side of it that tells you the experience of one of those commercial license holders, the Wagoba First Nation on Cape Breton, who have a right to harvest baby eels. And if poaching continues to go on and the species it continues to be threatened or becomes endangered, then the fishery will be shut down. And something actually really fascinating happened. I mean, I'd say fascinating, but really it's heartbreaking and troubling. Last year, the baby eel fishery was shut down quite prematurely because of conflict between licensed fishers and non-licensed fishers. And that is how threatened this industry is. So yes, this trafficking and sting operation is going on, but behind all of this, there are people whose livelihoods are at stake. And if the fishery gets shut down and if hundreds of kilograms are taken out of the river that can't be fished legally, like there's a lot of people that are going to be hurt by it. And so there's always this other side to it. And I think, when you talk about my job and what I get out of like learning about all these stories, that was one of the most surprising things when we started this project, was learning about the stakes involved to people who are victims of these crimes. And like, this really is their livelihood. And I mean, that can't be overstated,
Yeah. The health of the economy, the health of people, the health of the environment, the health of the other species. I mean, you hit it all. Congratulations on season 2 of Farm Crime. People can find it now. It's out on CBC Gem. And of course, you can learn more by following Geoff on Twitter, and also check out bigcedarfilms.com, right, Geoff? bigcedarfilms.com?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, actually, I'll plug another project that we just released last year with our partners, Lost Time Media. A film about the Calgary Police Service called Above the Law that's available on CBC, and there's a feature version that's called No Visible Trauma, and it looks at a couple incidents of excessive force and some of the failures of the respective oversight bodies in Alberta and to hold those officers accountable. So, I mean, we have this other kind of more eccentric project about true crime, and then another really important and critical issue that is facing Albertans right now as well. So I encourage people to check that out as well on CBC Above the Law.
And doing such important work, you and your team, these stories wouldn't get told if people like you weren't taking them on. Geoff, congratulations on season 2 of Farm Crime, and thanks for hanging out with us into overtime. This was a lot of fun. Learned a lot today.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, you bet. That's Geoff Morrison. He's a producer of Farm Crime Season 2. He's joining us. He's with Big Cedar Films, which is doing some really cool stuff. I was trying to keep an eye on the live chat through this, and there was a lot going on. But Sam, I know that you monitor it as part of your duties. And what was this thing? What's everybody talking about Dairy Queen? Why are people talking about Dairy Queen on the live chat? Were you able to understand what was going on there?
Oh, people I think that we need to throw a little bit more love towards the dairy-free dilly bars.
Oh, the dairy-free dilly.
Yeah.
We've not talked about them enough.
We've not talked about them we haven't talked about them for a while.
What prompted that?
I don't know what prompted that, but that's been a buzz on the old chatterbox for the last couple days.
All right. Well, hey, I mean, there's no time like the present to remind you that our friends at Dairy Queen do have dairy-free dilly bars. I've tried them. They're excellent.
I can put my stamp of approval on them as well.
You have also had.
Yeah.
And because I wanted to have an educated, informed sample, I had a dairy-free one, and then I had a dairy one.
You just did them back to back.
Back to back, with no break in between, aside from removing the packaging. That was it. Back to back, crushed them. And I could have crushed 2 more probably, and then maybe 2 more after that if the boys were cheering me on. You can find your dairy-free dilly bars at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. They're such valued partners of ours. And I can't say it. I can't. Well, okay. Well, I'm talking to Mark and Michael next week. It's not up for me to announce. But we're talking about maybe some sort of a Real Talk discount. I mean, I don't want to announce it. It's not ready to be announced. We've not hammered out the details. I do not have the green light, except I can confirm that we are talking about it. So if you're going to be going through their drive-thrus, you let them know. You let them know who sent you. The same goes with the team at Friesen Brothers. I hear from some. I was walking on the sidewalk yesterday. I'm going to tell you a sidewalk story in just a moment. That's going to move you. I guarantee it. This girl stops me on the sidewalk. She can see, I guess, the eyes. I was wearing my mask. She could see, and she says, "I just went to Friesen Brothers for the first time." And I went, and she went, "Uh-huh." And then she just kept walking. And I went, "Okay." I was like, thanks for watching Real Talk.
Can I start lobbying for one to be built near my house?
Well, you can join the lobby.
Okay.
Because we're hearing from, probably you want yours in your part of town.
We live in the same neighborhood.
We got people that in Calgary are wanting Friesen Brothers, people from out of province. We've got viewers and listeners in Saskatchewan and British Columbia that are going, what the hell? Like, where's our Friesen Brothers? The more that we talk about it. Maybe today I'll focus real quick on the honey. Because we talked about all the bee thefts and the murder hornets and all that cool stuff. If you check out Friesen Brothers' new store in South Edmonton, their 15th Alberta store, check out their Alberta honey display. It will blow your mind. They're going to have bees on their roof starting this summer at the grocery store. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Also wanted to remind you that the team at Westworld Computers keeps our studio powered up, and they can do the same for you at home or in the office if you're working away from home, or hey, if you're getting set to ramp up your home office, why not talk to them? Daryl and his team have been in business independently for more than 40 years, Daryl's family has, and they've got the new lineup plus the gently pre-owned with full warranty. You make sure you let them know you heard about them on Real Talk. Wanted to touch on something quickly, so we've not had a chance to review it in robust fashion. The announcement was made by Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole while we've been doing the show live, so I'm going to rely on some reporting by David Cochran, Salima Shivji, and Aaron Wary with CBC News. They write that the Conservatives' climate plan would replace the Liberal carbon tax with a lower levy of their own. So reads the report filed just a short time ago after years of criticizing the Liberal carbon tax. The Conservative Party is proposing a climate plan that also puts a price on carbon for consumers, according to a copy of the party's climate plan obtained by CBC News. Instead of the Liberal carbon tax and rebate system, Aaron O'Toole is proposing a charge, a levy. Make sure you remind everybody, all the Conservatives that have said it's not a levy, it's a tax. All right. Well, if he's going to say levy, you make sure you remind him it's still a tax on fuel. Do I care? I don't give a shit about whether it's a levy or a tax. It's something that people are paying. It's semantics. This is a reference to a radio thing. Jason Kenney and I got into it once. He says, you refuse to call it a tax. I said, oh my God. They're going to charge a levy on fuel purchases and use the money to fund personalized that's the most Kenny thing you can do, is hone in on shit like that. They're going to use the money to fund personalized savings account, which Canadians can use for environmentally friendly purchases. Notes the plan. We recognize the most efficient way to reduce our emissions is to use pricing mechanisms. Pretty interesting stuff. So we'll get into this in more robust fashion tomorrow, and we're going to be talking dollars and cents tomorrow and then leading up to Monday's budget, and we'll have you covered. Andrew Coyne, this is an interesting tweet from him. He says, after years of urging the Conservatives to adopt a carbon tax, I feel disinclined to mock them for having now done so. We can get into the detailed merits and demerits of the proposal later, but this is a gutsy move by O'Toole. So that's a take from Andrew Coyne. Because a lot of people, Sam, what I have seen, again, anecdotally, on social media right now is people saying, oh, for years Aaron O'Toole's been fighting against the carbon tax, now he's implementing one. I think, quite frankly, not to oversimplify, but the Conservatives know that they have to be perceived as having a viable plan, or people just aren't going to think about voting. They won't even consider it.
But the Conservatives hate the carbon tax because they didn't come up with it, right? Like, there's other places where Conservative governments have backed carbon pricing.
Including Alberta.
Including, the OG carbon levy was in Alberta, right? And so, like, it's an economic-driven force that is actually a very conservative-friendly principle. The other thing, and I'm just going to come out right here and saying it, I don't cringe at the word tax. It's a tax. It's great. We pay taxes. We live in a civilized society. Give me a tax to pay. Stop dressing it up with other languages. It's a tax. It's fine to call it that.
Trevor Boudreau is responding to that Twitter exchange that I had earlier with Corey Morgan that I talked about, where I basically asked him if you could support a party that could achieve government with a climate policy that would be saleable to the general public, in other words, one that people would buy into, or at least could consider buying into, or if you could support a party that would forever be in opposition based on a principled stand against something like a carbon tax. What would be your choice? And Corey said his choice would be to remain principled. And he pointed to the work that Preston Manning did in opposition with the Reform Party. Trevor Boudreau's watching, and he chimes in. He says, I'd be curious what climate policy is saleable to the general public. Stephen Harper was attacked for his climate targets, which were initially adopted by the Trudeau Liberals. Trudeau's now promising a 30% reduction from 2005 levels, net zero by 2050, says Trevor, which is basically impossible. That's his matter of opinion. We can get into that debate, but when Trevor, he's on to something when he says, I'd be curious what climate policy is saleable to the general public. So should be political parties. They should be talking to members of the general public. They should be talking to experts, economists, energy scientists, market experts with regards to oil and gas and trends, global commentators, investors, people related to industry, people related to environmental science. You need to, and pollsters and people that are skilled with public messaging. I mean, you have to build a machine that allows you to understand what is saleable to the general public and what is impactful. In other words, who will endorse your climate plan as being meaningful and then sell it as such. And you're probably going to say, oh, it's such a tacky word. You got to sell it. But that is what campaigning is, right? And that's how, if the Conservatives want to form government, this is how they're going to have to hit this up. I wanted to get a couple of mentions in before I tell a story. And this is something that happened to me yesterday. And it involves you, Real Talkers. And I want to end the show on that, because it's going to launch you into the rest of your day with, I think, a second of sober thought and then pure positivity. But first, let me remind you that tomorrow we'll be ending our show in a bit of a different fashion. It'll feel good. We'll blow off a little steam. I can't believe it's Friday already tomorrow. We've got a great roundtable coming up. We're going to be talking about curriculum, education, other issues and matters and things that affect you and your family. And we'll wrap up with Trash Talk, which is us reading your emails sent in to talk@ryanjesperson.com. This doesn't have to be about politics. It can be anything. The other week, somebody wrote in how nobody knows how to use traffic circles, or somebody wrote in about plastic packaging. What have been some of the other funny ones? We get some great ones.
Pie versus cake. That was an early one.
That one, pie versus cake. Yeah, I was surprised because that, to me, was one of the more divisive conversations we've had on the show.
Well, and I mean, like, raisins have come up a gajillion times. Let's not. Yeah, I know.
I thought we've settled. I thought the science was settled on raisins. I think we've voted overwhelmingly yes to raisins. Now people are just going to lose their minds. Trash Talk, talk@ryanjesperson.com is where you can send in your gripes. We still have some room to review before we nail down who's going to be included in tomorrow's segment. Of course, this is presented by the team at Local Waste, who for more than 25 years have been providing local waste services for their partners, businesses, big and small. They love talking trash and they love fighting for your business. In other words, give them a shout. Ask for Chris, McKell, or Lauren. You'll find all their contact information at localwaste.ca or under the sponsors tab on our website. You tell them what you're paying your current provider. You tell them what the landscape looks like with regards to your bottom line, and they would love to earn your business. That's what they're all about. You can find out more at localwaste.ca. Also, a big shout out to the team at Clean Air Club. Your chance to save money and breathe easy exists right now at cleanairclub.ca. You tell them what size you need your furnace filter to be. Next thing you know, sometimes the next day, they're dropped off on your front porch. So you pay less than you would in store. You stay on schedule, making sure that all that nasty stuff is filtered out of the air going through your vents. And of course, you feel good as well supporting a partner that supports this show at cleanairclub.ca. We told you yesterday about Emily Cave and her Instagram post. She lost her son, Colby, tragically. A sudden medical event, and Colby ultimately, on the anniversary of his passing, was laid to rest in a very meaningful and a very emotional service. And Emily, shortly after, posted on Instagram that she was taking a step back, that she was walking away from social media for a while. She talked about some of the bullying that she's been encountering and the impact it's having on her mental health. It's broken her, or at least come close to. She's got this kind of power to her spirit. And our conversation prompted an email. Again, talk@ryanjesperson.com, an email from Tracy. And Tracy said, Ryan, I was just listening to you discuss Emily Cave, and I wondered if perhaps you could ask Real Talkers to support the program that has been renamed in Colby's honor. They're calling it Colby's Kids, and it's a community program with an emphasis on mental health initiatives. Sam, we can show those that are watching on YouTube right now. If you just go to nhl.com/Oilers/community, you'll be able to find it. Or, of course, you can reach out to us. We'll be happy to send you the link. So Colby's Kids is a community program with an emphasis on mental health initiatives. Writes Tracy, Emily has said that this is going to be her focus, and it's going to be how she'll keep Colby's memory alive in the community. And I just thought that was absolutely wonderful. I know a lot of you wrote in yesterday after the fact to say, wow, like, you know, her experience. I know I saw that several of you reached out and left comments on her Instagram at m.cave. We weren't sure if she was going to be checking them because she's walking away for a while and taking a break that she needs. And a lot of you wrote into the show as well and sent us emails. Some of you saying, please, this isn't to be read on the air. You just needed to get something off your chest. Some of you dug into the idea of the toxicity of social media. Some of you talked about what it must be like to live and grieve in the public eye. We had a really powerful message about grieving in the public eye. So I reflected on those, and we finished the work on producing today's show, and we pushed out our clips, so you can see maybe the episodes you've missed, and I had a haircut. And so I go downtown Edmonton, beautiful day, parked a ways away, and I was walking. I was walking on the sidewalk. It's a beautiful day, sun's hitting my face. And I get my haircut, I step back out onto the sidewalk, and this girl's walking towards me. And she's wearing her mask too. She had a hat kind of pulled down over her eyes. And she's walking. I just thought we were going to walk past each other on the sidewalk. But she walks up to me. You know when somebody walks up to you with intent? She says, Ryan. I said, hey. She says, thanks. And I went, for what? She goes, I'm Emily. And it kind of took me a second. And then all of a sudden I go, and we're standing literally in the shadow of Rogers Place. We're standing in the shadow of the NHL arena where Colby Cave, up until this devastating medical incident and his untimely passing, starred for the Edmonton Oilers. And here is Emily Cave, a serendipitous, kind of a happy accident, walking down the sidewalk the same time I am. And I just had this, I just felt emotion surge through my body. And in any other time, you might offer a hug, or I didn't know what was but it's just one of those, the pandemic, it's so weird, the pandemic is, but that you could feel the energy coming from Emily. And we actually had a wonderful conversation, and I'm going to keep most of it private because she was an absolutely open book, but I can tell you how much your messages of support to her meant to her, because she told me from her own mouth. She told me that so many people reached out to her and said, did you see the thing on Real Talk? And she told me what it's been like to hear from you, the audience members, and to fill her cup and to restore her spirit and to continue to do that, or to make a commitment, as some of you said to her, to continue to do that, to be there for her in ways that you'll figure out, despite the fact that you don't even know her personally. And I guess I just wanted to thank you. Number one, I wanted to draw your attention to the Colby Cave Memorial Fund and to Colby's Kids, this mental health initiative, this program through the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation. If you want to find a tangible, meaningful way to do something, or to express your grief, or to express your encouragement, that's one way to do it. And I'm going to say, I don't know when she's going to check her Instagram again, but keep leaving messages. It's em.cave. That's her account. Let her know you care about her. Let her know you heard about the story on Real Talk or not. Doesn't matter to me. And maybe continue to reach out to other people who are walking through early steps and stages of grief. We don't ever have the words for them. I think of our conversation with the White family, with Rob White's wife and kids, with Roberta, who joined us, and his son Strider and Alliance, and Chris Barrett, his best buddy. That was earlier this week. Rob White, you remember, slipped through and went under the ice in the North Saskatchewan River, saving a dog. He saved the dog. We don't know how to have these conversations. We can't relate to these people, really. We can imagine. We can try to walk a mile in their shoes, but ultimately we can't. But as a community, we come here and we gather, and we find strength and encouragement in these gatherings, and then also we can extrapolate that, and we can push that out. We can widen our circle, and we can remind people that they're loved and cared for and valued and appreciated. So I wanted to thank every one of you that left a message for her yesterday. It resonated with her big time, and I'll never forget that interaction on that sidewalk just outside Rogers Place. That was yesterday in real life. Love you guys. We'll talk to you tomorrow. It's going to be a great roundtable coming up. We're endeavoring to speak with at least 3 of the trustees or chairs of the school boards that have said, we ain't implementing this curriculum draft. There's a long list, closing in on 30. Plus, other news of the day as we lead up to Monday's budget. We've got you covered here on Real Talk. Have an amazing Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.